Reborn as the Viking Pirate King. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction, so please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter, and if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 26: Entering the Church. Under cover of a torrential downpour, Loki and his 8 companions rapidly approached the gates of this coastal town. The rapidly falling raindrops formed an impenetrable web between heaven and earth, greatly enhancing their concealment. They had no idea what time it was or how long the downpour would last. Therefore, they had to hurry. Loki, carrying a blood-red great axe, walked at the front of the group. As they approached the town gate, as expected, it was already closed. Touching the heavy wooden door, he and the satyr simultaneously listened intently. There were only 2 sentries behind the gate, one already asleep, the other dozing off. "Use the grappling hook and climb to the other side of the wall," Loki whispered. Like Hanshu village, the walls of this town were made of wood. They were only 3 meters high. Climbing them wouldn't be difficult. Remember, don't kill them once you reach the other side, just knock them unconscious with the butt of your sword. If we spend the entire night entering the monastery, and the bodies are found at the gate the next day, we're all doomed. If these 2 were only knocked unconscious, with no obvious wounds, they probably won't cause much trouble. After all, it's dereliction of duty for the guards on duty to fall asleep in the middle of the night. Sat nodded and called over another hunter. The 2 swiftly scaled the city wall with their grappling hooks. Soon, the city's wooden gates were pushed open a crack. The Viking warriors, leaning sideways, entered the village. Not even a drop of blood. Beautiful, Loki patted Sat's shoulder firmly, giving him a thumbs up. They gently tucked the unconscious guards' bodies into the sentry box and laid them both down comfortably. Then, they continued their procession, moving swiftly through the shadows of the streets toward the church. Once inside, Loki discovered it was far larger than he had expected. You have to remember, this was just an ordinary coastal town, neither a port nor a trading center. Yet, such an ordinary city boasted 3 or 4 intersecting streets. At the intersections, 2 and even 3-story wooden buildings could be seen. Restaurants, inns, and shops, everything a city should have was available. The main street was paved with stone, and adorned with plants and flowers. No wonder the Vikings were able to make their fortunes by raiding England. From the outside, this place was far superior to the bitter cold of Slavic lands. Loki and his companions had no time for idle wandering. They raced towards the Holy Cathedral, the tallest building in the town square. As they approached the church's doors, Loki gave his men his final instructions. "Brother Satyr, you're the fastest. Do you see the bell tower?" Satyr followed Loki's finger, peering towards the church's highest point. He nodded gently. "Once we're inside the church, head straight for the bell tower. It's the one that overlooks the entire city. If those priests discover our invasion and ring the tower's giant bell, the entire city will be awakened. So, once you've reached the bell tower, immediately cut the ropes and lower the suspended bell. Then, do you see those bird cages next to the bell? Those are the pigeons the Saxons use for communication. To prevent further trouble, chop them all up, leaving no one alive." Sartre nodded vigorously. "Brother Wade, take a brother and guard the back door behind the square. Once we break into the church, anyone trying to escape through the back door will be knocked unconscious with an axe, no questions asked. If necessary, we can kill 1 or 2. We absolutely must not let anyone escape through the back door. If even one person slips away and attracts reinforcements, we'll all be dead." Wade, another hunter in the village, also nodded. Vader and Satyr were Loki's most efficient men, so he assigned them the most important tasks. "Are you all ready?" Seeing all his companions grip their weapons, Loki raised his crimson stone axe and stood silently before the wooden door, like a statue. He waited. A flash of lightning flashed, followed by a crack of thunder. With the sound of thunder, Loki brought his axe down on the wooden door with all his might. The fragile door shattered like an eggshell. Before the young monk on duty behind the door could even cry out, Loki's massive hand clamped over his mouth. The next second, he slammed the monk's head against the stone wall behind him. With a thud, the young monk, no more than 16 or 17, fainted. Beside him, Satyr strode towards the nearby bell tower. Remember, try not to kill. If you can knock them out, knock them out. Tie them up and don't let them make any noise. We've brought too few people this time. We must do everything we can to avoid a large-scale conflict. The men around him responded and headed towards the monks' sleeping quarters. Only Loki, carrying a crimson stone axe, slowly ascended the stairs to the ornately decorated second-floor gallery. This was undoubtedly just a remote church in a remote city. Yet, the interior was still magnificent beyond his imagination. Legend has it that in ancient times, believers of the Holy Lord would donate their meager possessions to the church, seeking salvation and forgiveness from the gods. In this world, when mortals can pray for strength from the gods, religious faith is undoubtedly even more fervent and intense. Along the way, Loki was met with exquisite marble carvings everywhere. Murals of the Holy Lord's 12 disciples adorned the walls, and the staircase handrails were carved with the heads of various exotic beasts. Even the floor was a patchwork of smooth marble, patterned with intricate patterns. Looking out over the courtyard from the second-floor balcony, he noticed the flowers planted there were all meticulously matched in color. The outside of the church and the inside truly were two different worlds. Compared to this church, the Storm's End, where Loki had visited with his father as a child, seemed like a straw platform, unworthy of the occasion. In his previous life, he often heard classmates studying abroad rave about how wealthy the church was, even booking 5-star hotels to lure them into the faith. It seemed their claims weren't so exaggerated. The Holy Episcopal Church truly lived up to its legend. Loki strolled slowly through this village church, like Granny Leo entering the Grand View Garden. In a long corridor, its walls and ceiling carved from snow-white marble, he saw a row of exquisitely crafted statues. Approaching and examining them closely, he saw the current generation of popes and cardinals. Each bust was carved from snow-white marble, with their names inscribed beneath their heads. Having names engraved beneath the statues wasn't an exaggeration. What was even more outrageous was that the names of these archbishops were carved from gold. As for the Pope, who stood in the center, he was even more imposing. His statue wore a golden crown, adorned with a string of gems of various colors. In the very center, a single diamond, roughly the size of a pinky finger. Holy crap! Loki exclaimed in a low voice. He had never imagined such an ordinary church could conceal such treasures. And they didn't even need to hide them, they were displayed openly in the hallway. Just the gems and gold from these statues alone would be enough to buy a fine Viking longship. Long-term poverty and a thirst for gold prompted him to immediately raise his axe in attempt to remove a few gems. However, just as he raised his stone axe, a thunderbolt struck. A pale flash of lightning revealed a slender figure in black robes. He stood motionless in the corridor not far from Loki, a broadsword gleaming with cold light in his hand. Chapter 27 Loki vs. Jerome. Across from Loki, the holy bishop monk, wielding a fine steel broadsword, was none other than Jerome. He had just been ruthlessly ejected from his bedroom by the bishop. As he was about to return to his fellow monks' bunk beds to rest, he thought he heard a faint, muffled cry downstairs, and even the sound of a wooden door shattering. Jerome had copied scriptures for over 20 years, constantly reciting the Gospels of the saints in his heart. This had endowed his mind with an exceptional purity, resistant to illusions, tricks, or rumors. When he heard the faint cry of alarm, he concluded that danger had befallen the monastery. He turned and sprinted, dashing into the church's armory and retrieving a broadsword. Jerome was the only one in the monastery who knew that his holy bishop Justice Path had unknowingly reached sequence 5, Night of the Holy Light. This level of sequence was unprecedented among the holy bishop's scribes. For in the eyes of those higher-ranking bishops, copying was merely menial work. High-ranking clergy believed that the only way to spread the gospel was to cultivate connections with the powerful and influential, recruit them, and expand a church's influence. Humans are destined to gain social status through socializing. While working in isolation might cultivate a skill, a narrow network of connections fundamentally blocks advancement through the order. But no one could have imagined that Jerome would be a scribe for 20 years. Any skill, when mastered to a certain level, becomes akin to magic. Jerome's 20 years of copying had transformed his handwritten Gospels into exquisite works of art, a coveted possession. Beyond anything else, his ability to transform careless brushstrokes into small animals and flowers was considered miraculous by others. Archbishop Francis's wealth and the splendor of his cathedrals over the years were largely due to Jerome's handwritten Gospels. All of his exquisite Gospels were given as gifts to the princes and nobles of the English Isles. These nobles treasured his manuscript with great respect. Upon learning it was a scroll from a disciple of the saint, they enshrined it alongside the holy cross of the holy bishop, allowing it to be read only after bathing and changing clothes. Consequently, Jerome's sequence level rose at an incredible pace. According to the holy bishop's internal promotion rules, all paths to sequence 7 and above required reporting to the Pope and joining the Crusaders as non-commissioned officers. As a Knight of the Holy Light, Jerome would be assigned at least a rank of Knight Commander or higher upon joining the Crusaders. This position would bring honor to his family, and in many nations revering the holy bishop, the king would even grant him a permanent knighthood and a fiefdom. However, Jerome placed little importance on these titles and nobility. Even when he first awakened the power of holy light, he had chosen the path of justice at random. He never devoted time to serious cultivation, nor did he care when he would achieve a breakthrough or what benefits it would bring him. He simply knew it seemed harmless. In recent years, his physical strength had improved, and he would recover the next day if he fell ill. Sometimes, even wounds from thorns or nails would heal on their own. Today, for the first time in over 30 years, he had wielded a sword. Seeing the figure wielding a bloody axe, attempting to pry open the gemstone not far from the corridor, he raised his broadsword and chanted a prayer. A rich, pure, white holy light surged from his body, enveloping him like a god. When Loki, on the other side of the passage, saw this scene, his jaw nearly dropped to the ground with a thud. Holy shit! What the hell? Had God himself suddenly appeared? Shrouded in white light, Jerome clutched his broadsword, chanting the prayer continuously. I am the fire of awakening sent by the Holy Father to the world, to dispel darkness and evil, and slay the sin and demons that plague the world. The sacred gospel of the saints blazed from his lips, his first battle prayer. Jerome felt his entire body surging with holy energy. Sword in hand, he charged towards Loki, roared, and slashed. A beam of pure white holy light, over 2 meters long, burst forth from his sword blade. Loki, seeing this, held up his blood-red stone axe to resist. But the pure white holy light, like a ripple, passed over the stone axe and struck him directly. The light wave slid across his arm, incising a wound so deep that the bone was visible. It hurts. It hurts so much. In that instant, Loki suddenly understood many things. England was far from the fragile imagery he had seen in movies and TV series in his previous life. In those films, towering Viking warriors slaughtered English soldiers with ease. But think about it, is that realistic? 2 base Protoss versus 4 base Zerg. No matter how formidable the Protoss' individual combat capabilities were, they couldn't withstand the onslaught of a vast swarm of Zerg soldiers with their economic advantage. Any English monastery could be so wealthy. Loki doubted that the guards there were all weaklings. And sure enough, the first enemy he encountered in the monastery was a powerful chosen one. Loki felt no fear, but instead a faint excitement. Nothing could bring greater joy than defeating a formidable foe. He released his arm, letting the drops of blood drip from his wound and hit the ground. As the blood touched the ground, a thin, crimson mist rose from it, instantly enveloping the entire corridor in a thin, blood-red haze. A demon. I see a demon crawling from hell. Jerome didn't hesitate. He raised his broadsword and chanted, preparing to unleash another holy light slash. But at that moment, Loki moved. Amidst a faint blood mist, he wielded a stone axe, his movements as swift as a ghost. In a few flashes, he was within 10 steps of Jerome. However, Jerome, shrouded in holy light, hadn't yet finished his prayer. Raising his axe, Loki didn't rush to attack, but instead used the handle to strangle Jerome's neck, preventing him from continuing his prayer. This move is called interrupt spellcasting. The chanting stopped, and the pure white holy light that had just condensed on Jerome's broadsword faltered, seemingly on the verge of dissipation. The axe handle clamped tightly around Jerome's neck, temporarily losing both hands. But he still had weapons to fight with. The next second, he slammed his hard forward into the back of Jerome's head. Jerome felt as if he had been struck by a heavy hammer. The pure white holy light continued to protect his body, but it couldn't suppress the dizziness that washed over him. Kicking the broadsword away, Loki then took back Jerome's hands. He pulled a rope from his bosom and bound him tightly, like a hairy crab. This was a formidable foe with immense physical prowess and magical power. But what puzzled Loki was why this man's fighting skills were as weak as a baby's. Not only did he stand still while casting spells, but he also didn't dodge or evade the enemy's attacks, letting him take his toll like a statue. It felt like a helpless peasant who had somehow unleashed a cheat. Confused, Loki hoisted him onto his shoulders and threw him into the chapel. The unsuspecting monks were knocked unconscious by the axe handles in their sleep, and within 10 minutes, they were all held hostage by the Vikings. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28: A Full Bowl. I'm sorry, the church school is closed today. 2 days of torrential rain caused the roof to collapse. We're working hard to organize repairs these past few days. I estimate. The young monk turned away, noticing Loki, dressed in his monk's robes, standing beside him. Don't worry, Auntie. I estimate the children will be able to go back to school in 3 to 5 days. As he spoke, Loki reached out his large hand and stroked the Celtic child's golden hair. After the mother and daughter had walked away, Loki leaned close to the monk's ear and whispered softly, "Right, just like I said, persuade all the residents to leave. Don't even think about reporting to the sheriff. Don't forget, your Lord Rector is still in my hands. At the slightest sign of trouble, I'll kill your Lord Rector first, then all your monks. Before I leave, I'll throw the statues of the Cardinal and His Holiness the Pope into the cesspool, so, don't push me." Beads of sweat trickled down the young monk's face. The English-speaking demon beside him undoubtedly put him under immense pressure. Seeing the fear in his eyes, Loki nodded contentedly and retreated back into the church. Inside, 32 monks, along with the dean, priests, and church children, were bound and herded into the chapel. The chapel was the heart of the church. Built in a remote part of Northumbria, its ceiling stood nearly 3 meters high. Rows of long benches faced 2 massive stained glass windows. These exquisite Byzantine-made windows depicted the 12 apostles battling demons. Beneath them sat a massive silver cross, now dismantled by the Vikings. Loki was astonished to discover that this exquisite cross, more than a man's height, was forged entirely from solid silver. It took the combined strength of 2 strong Vikings to barely lift it. Meanwhile, crate after crate of gold bars and silver coins, seized from the basement, the rector's chambers, and the corners of the church, were piled beneath the silver cross. Thousands of them. Besides these, the Vikings also seized dozens of gleaming gems of varying brilliance, stacked atop the gold and silver. Whenever Loki's gaze fell upon this pile of gold and silver, his eyes would gleam with fascination. Since his birth, the largest sum of wealth he had ever seen was a mere 100 silver coins, badly oxidized, blackened, and even slightly moldy, Slavic coinage. They were nothing compared to the mountain of King Alar coins piled before him. Even more valuable was a silver cross, cast entirely from solid silver and studded with over 20 grams of gemstones. The cross shone with a gleaming silver, without a trace of oxidation. In its center hung the body of the Holy Lord, meticulously carved. The facial expression, the hair, even the texture of the muscles were precisely rendered. As for the weight, it must have weighed at least 80 kilograms. If Loki's guess was correct, this must be the most precious relic in the entire church. The pile of gold and silver at his feet, given Loki's 20-plus years of experience, could easily replace 2 Hanshu villages, if not more. In other words, in this ordinary holy cathedral, they had, with just 7 men, plundered a fortune that Loki's father, grandfather, and even great-grandfather had struggled for generations to amass. Loki's hands trembled slightly, and his Viking brothers beside him couldn't help but frequently glance at the pile of gold and silver. With so much wealth, they actually use a group of weak weirdos to guard it here. What do you think is the reason, brother? Haha, who the hell knows? They actually believe in a dead god. Look, the one hanged on the cross. I sneaked into their bedroom yesterday and saw me coming in with a big axe. Their first reaction was not to resist, but to pick up the cross and chant a spell at me. Damn it, I thought it was some kind of magic. I chanted for a long time without any reaction, and in the end, I knocked them out with 1 punch. Haha, now that I have money, I want to fix my cannon first, and then go to Valhalla. Hey, which upgrade path potion do you think I should exchange for? Sea Giant. Sea Giants are awesome. They can fight 10 people at once and can even walk underwater. Haha, you don't think about how low the upgrade probability of the Sea Giant path is. It's still the Berserker path. It's powerful and reliable. Once you are promoted to Sequence 2, you can be immune to most injuries, Several Viking warriors chatted excitedly, and Loki smiled faintly, noticing that they had already been secretly stuffing their pockets with gems and gold bars. He ruffled their hair vigorously, choosing to observe without comment. For all the Viking warriors who had sailed with him, this courage alone was worthy of recognition. Even more than the vast wealth of gold and silver, Loki was thrilled by his new body. He hadn't intended to acquire this body, but rather, at the moment of his death, a raven had snatched up the ancient god's inner core and placed it in his mouth. Entering the bloody mist, Loki suspected that the three giants had recognized him as one of their own because he had consumed the ancient god's inner core. They helped him dispel the blue god poison within him while also upgrading his body. Thus, by some unintended consequence, Loki ascended to the rank of Chosen One, Bloody Creator, Red God Path, Sequence 9, Knife-wielding ghoul. The words emblazoned on his arm, like a product label, clearly revealed his sequence level. However, it was only after experiencing actual combat that he discovered the strength of this body. Like old Valder, who died in the sunken city, the blood within him evaporated upon contact with the ground, creating a thin, bloody mist. Within this mist, old Valder could use a skill similar to blink, disappearing and then reappearing, while Loki's strength, speed, and endurance were significantly enhanced. He discovered that while running at high speed within the mist, he could even enter a brief state of nothingness, becoming as invulnerable as air. Furthermore, after leaving combat, he discovered that the wounds inflicted by the Holy Sword's energy healed remarkably quickly. Overnight, they were as good as new, leaving no scars behind. The chosen ones of this plane were truly a completely different species from mortals. Compared to the pile of gold bars and silver coins in the center of the chapel, Loki was even more intrigued by the dozens of bound priests to the side. Yesterday, after securing all the monks and thoroughly investigating the church, Loki discovered that the monastery actually contained a religious school. Schools are the hallmarks of human civilization, and the teachers who impart knowledge within them are, at every stage of human civilization, the treasures of their time. A quick glance at their textbooks revealed that the curriculum was largely theological, focusing on topics like the Gospels and God's love for humanity. But beyond these, the monks also taught basic religious rituals, arithmetic, and basic knowledge of agriculture and crafts. This astonished Loki. Students and teachers in these schools spend a significant amount of time each day in them. During this time, they are unable to work, hunt, or farm. As a time traveler, Loki had considered opening a school in Hanshu village. However, the Vikings' low productivity made this a completely unrealistic idea. It wasn't just Hanshu village. In 90% of Viking settlements, the Vikings couldn't eat unless they worked. In all of Scandinavia, the only building even remotely resembling a school was the Temple of Storms. This also meant that 99% of the Vikings in Scandinavia were illiterate. Only the Storm monks of the Storm Temple, a few nobles, and lords could inherit the knowledge of their ancestors through generations of transmission. This one-on-one transmission was too inefficient. Now, with money, Loki looked at these monks who were responsible for imparting knowledge, his eyes filled with greed. Constant sword practice could train a good warrior, and daily hunting in the forest could produce good hunters, but how could one obtain a teacher who could teach and educate? Loki was unable to find a teacher himself. His pirate instinct told him, only by robbing. I must find a way to bring them back. Whatever these people taught me. English was now the dominant culture in Europe, and simply learning the language was extremely useful. Not to mention a little math, which was as valuable as a cheat in robbery. Once this idea took root in his mind, it became like a stubborn weed, impossible to shake off. But to achieve this goal, he still lacked one crucial thing, a ship. Chapter 29 Target, Yorkshire. Pirates are called pirates precisely because they have ships. This monastery is rich in gold and silver, and even 2 silk women's undergarments were found in the abbot's private chambers. But there's no ship. Although Lindisfarne Abbey is built on a hillside not far from the North Sea, the monks rarely venture out to sea. For centuries, they haven't encountered any castaways from the North Sea. Most outsiders who reach the English Isles cross the English Channel south of the islands from the Frankish Duchy. The strait is only a little over 30 kilometers wide, so even some extreme sports enthusiasts can swim across it. They don't need a large ship. Loki pondered for a long time how to get home. He could find a shabby canoe-like boat to cross the English Channel. But then, their group of 11 would have to traverse France, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden, almost halfway across the European continent, before finally reaching Norway, where Coldwater Village lies. Even if they rode non-stop, the journey would take a year, not to mention the potential for unexpected events. This was clearly unrealistic. He pondered for a long time, watching the sun near its zenith. At noon, he dismissed the monks from the kitchen to cook, then crouched quietly beside Archbishop Francis. He was lying on the floor, feigning sleep, thinking he was inconspicuous among the monks. Little did he know, his immense size betrayed him. Archbishop Francis was terrified. He had never imagined such pale, barbarian-like enemies could emerge from the vast North Sea. He could never believe that what the madman Jerome had said was true. As the Viking axe reached his neck, he urinated and defecated in fear. And just then, as Loki crouched gently beside him, he felt the urge to urinate again. "Master Archbishop, from now on, I'll speak, and you'll listen. Speak in fluent English." Loki gently slapped Francis' broad shoulders. The Vikings had bound him like a ham with ropes, rubbing out his excess fat. Seeing Loki's claws approach him, Francis trembled uncontrollably. "You can see I don't actually want to kill you, intentionally or unintentionally." Loki thrust his blood-red stone axe between Francis' legs. "If I wanted to, I can guarantee that none of you will survive within 5 minutes. So, there's no need to panic, I'm not an evil man." Loki smiled kindly. "Haha," Francis chuckled inwardly. He had never seen anyone dare to desecrate a holy cross like this in his entire life. Even if the man before him wasn't a scion of Satan, he was no better than a devil from hell. "We're just a bunch of kind-hearted bandits. We just stole a little money from you. What's the big deal? After all, as long as you have the Green Mountains, you can still have firewood." He brought the axe closer to Francis' legs. Francis could already feel the warm blade and see the mottled blood stains on it. "My lord, spare me. I've literally moved all the money in the church out for you. What you see now is all the wealth our church has accumulated over the past 100 years." The strong smell of urine wafted again. Loki frowned at Francis and shook his head helplessly. There were no such softies among the Vikings. He moved the axe aside, this time not holding it across Francis's crotch, but slung it around his neck. "I need a boat, not one of those small boats you fishermen use, but one that can carry at least 30 to 40 people, enough for a long sea voyage." Loki stretched out his hand and measured it in front of Francis's face. "Look, I'm a stranger here, and you're my only friend. I believe you can help me." Francis glanced at the axe around his neck, then at Loki beside him. Loki could feel his mind racing. He took the opportunity to lean close to his ear and continued, "As long as you have a ship, I will disappear from your sight forever. You continue to live your peaceful life, while I will disappear forever at sea, giving you a free and peaceful life." "How, Yorkshire?" Archbishop Francis shouted these 3 words. The initial disdain of his congregants turned to a hint of disgust. Yorkshire was the capital of the Kingdom of Northumbria, home to King Elarii's royal palace, and it was also the kingdom's largest residential area. This archbishop actually wanted to lure these bandits to Yorkshire in exchange for his own life. It turned out that he had no regard for the glory of the Holy Lord. "Archbishop, you must not bring these bandits into the king's land." "Yes, my lord." If the bishop knew, he would surely bring down divine punishment. Divine punishment? Haha. Archbishop Francis didn't care. Dishonor? When the bandits dragged 2 large boxes of silver coins and 2 sets of women's underwear from his bedroom in full view of the public, his reputation had already been tarnished. For him, everything that had happened last night was like a nightmare from which he would not wake up. He would rather lose half his soul than just make these demons that appeared out of nowhere disappear. "Yorkshire. My lord. Yorkshire is the capital of my kingdom of Northumbria and the most prosperous city in this area. England is an archipelago, and its inhabitants are not accustomed to ocean voyages. In Yorkshire's market, you'll find shops run by Franks, Visigoths, and even Tang people from the eastern lands of the Tang dynasty. While the Franks and Visigoths have fine ships, their shipbuilding skills are nothing compared to the Tang people's. Our western continental ships are nothing compared to the Tang people's tower ships. I can arrange for one of my subordinates to personally escort you to Yorkshire. I'm sure you'll be able to sell the goods you desire." His azure eyes locked with Francis's, and Loki was surprised to find that the Lord Patriarch spoke these words without a trace of guilt, as open and honest as if strolling in his own garden. He could not help but sigh that throughout history, a thick-skinned and ruthless heart has truly been a necessary quality for those in power. Another thing that alarmed him was Francis's use of the word Tang people. From him, Loki learned that there were Tang-owned shops in Yorkshire not far from here. Yet, Moyquin placed a Crimson Creator stone sculpture in a coastal cave not far from Lindisfarne Abbey. This in itself was quite intriguing. Every word in the overall map of the world clearly indicated that he had compiled it under the orders of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. Logically, he should have gained the support of the villagers in this foreign land. Each time this man used the portal to leave the underwater city, it was to obtain supplies and food. Help would have been even better. Yet, he still chose to act alone. Could this be a political conflict or some other conflict? Loki secretly harbored a suspicion. Furthermore, he felt that bringing the abbot along might not be a good idea. Only by keeping him within the abbey and controlling him could he intimidate the other monks. Turning to look at Jerome, who sat in meditation in the corner, a cold glint flashed in Loki's eyes. After gathering all the monks in the monastery, he discovered that the chosen one he had fought and successfully injured was actually of such a low rank. Meanwhile, the bloated, shameless, and ruthless Francis had actually ascended to the position of headmaster. Such a thing would never happen in the barbaric Scandinavian peninsula, but in England, brimming with culture and humanity, Loki suddenly felt a sense of familiarity, as if from another world. So familiar. Such a thing could only happen in a civilized society. Chapter 30, Anti-looting. After a long deliberation, Loki decided to travel with the satyr and Jerome to Yorkshire. There was a single reason: Jerome's personal combat prowess was the highest among all the monks. Furthermore, even after being knocked unconscious and bound by Loki, he showed no sign of panic or fear. He simply leaned against the wall, eyes closed, and silently recited prayers from the Gospels. Loki remembered the prayers clearly, and when he wielded the broadsword, the seemingly ordinary blade instantly became as terrifying as the Six Meridians' divine sword. If it weren't for the man's crude fighting skills, the outcome of this battle would be hard to predict. His calmness, rooted in his soul, also made Loki uneasy. As the only chosen one in the group, he felt that only by bringing him along would the other brothers guarding the monastery be safe. As dusk fell, the two of them donned the monks' robes and hoods of Lindisfarne Abbey. Jerome's hands were bound, and the satyr pulled the ropes from his arms, carrying a box of silver coins and the exquisite cross to the carriage. With a few whispered instructions, the two men drove out of the town under the cover of dusk. As they passed the town gate, two guards spotted them in a carriage from Lindisfarne Abbey and opened the gate for them without question. Seeing the large bumps on the backs of their heads, Loki couldn't help but smile. "Boss, it's just as you said. They haven't advertised anything." The satyr's words were filled with admiration. Over the years he'd been with Loki, he'd come to realize that brute force alone often didn't guarantee the best outcome. 3 years ago, his father had considered moving the family to Storm's End, Lord Bernard's fiefdom. Alhay the seer had divined that leaving would only lead to regrets. Now it seemed like the right decision. Leaving the town, the sky and earth were a deep blue. The outskirts of town were dotted with wooden villages and patchworks of farmland. This kind of scene was completely unheard of in Hanshu village. The Vikings' land was simply too barren. Scandinavia was the poorest and coldest region of the western continent. Hanshu village was blanketed with snow for 6 months of the year, and this was the southernmost point of the Viking territory. After all, they still had a few acres of thin land outside the village to cultivate. The northern tundra, located at the far north of the peninsula, had only 4 months of spring. The main city in the northern tundra was called Frostfort, and the Vikings who lived there called themselves Frostfolk, because rain, composed of water, never fell in that land. "My lords, you've taken the wrong direction." Shortly after leaving the city, a deep voice echoed from behind the carriage. Turning back, it was Jerome. He opened his tightly closed eyes a crack and glanced at Loki from the corner of his eye. His gaze was as clear as dewdrops floating on leaves in the morning. "Your Excellency, the Chosen One, are you willing to help a lost lamb like me find the right path?" Loki ducked into the carriage. He'd discovered this problem after leaving the city. The roads of Northumbria were devoid of road signs. Not only that, but they'd been traveling for ages, and they hadn't seen a single coachman. They didn't even know who to ask for directions. "Yes, but you must meet 2 conditions." After observing the robbers for most of the day, Jerome realized they weren't the kind of butchers whose hands were stained with blood. Yesterday, after wounding the leader with his broadsword, he hadn't killed him. Even after entering the monastery, they were focused on robbing. They had no intention of slaughtering anyone. "First, I ask you to untie the ropes that bind my hands. All beings are equal, No one is born to be another slave. In the name of the Holy Lord, I promise I will not take up arms in rebellion." With that, Jerome raised his bound hands. Loki stared into his clear eyes for a few seconds, then gazed at the darkening woodland behind him. Finally, he untied him with a stone axe in his hand. While this was partly due to the lack of extra weapons on the carriage and Jerome's fighting skills being rather mediocre, he also felt that someone with such pure eyes would likely keep their promise. "The second thing," Jerome said, extending a clean white hand. "I want 10, 20 silver coins, no, 40 silver coins." Loki nearly spat out blood. "Brother, we're robbers, and you're a hostage. We've barely left town, and you're already blackmailing us. Is there any justice in this world? Don't we pirates have any dignity? You won't give it to me? If you don't, we'll just have a standoff." Jerome was very calm. He hugged his shoulders with his hands and continued to sit in the back of the carriage like an old monk in meditation. After just 5 minutes, Loki broke down and compromised. He counted out 40 silver coins from the cash box behind him and handed them to him. Jerome smiled slightly, picked up a torch, lit it, got off the car and walked towards a farm on the side of the road. Loki stretched out his big hand and was about to grab his shoulder to bring him back, but at this moment, 2 crows cried from the carriage. Looking back, one of them had already landed gently on his palm. After so many things happened, Loki would no longer regard crows as ignorant beasts. "Are you asking me to follow him? Okay, let's go." The two walked one after the other on the dark country road. The land wet by the heavy rain was still moist. They walked into a farm with 1 foot deep and 1 foot shallow in the mud. It was already dusk, and all the houses were lit up. Jerome stood in front of a dilapidated farmhouse in the center of a village and knocked twice gently on the door. There was the sound of footsteps, and with a slight creak, an ordinary farmer in coarse linen clothes opened the door. "Oh my God, isn't this Father Jerome? Why didn't you tell me, the village chief, before you came to our Shuangshu village in the dark? Who is this?" The village chief pointed at Loki, and Jerome said softly, "This is the new monk. Come in quickly. Wife, look who's here." After entering the dilapidated farmhouse, Loki looked around and found that the lives of ordinary Saxon people were not necessarily better than those of the Vikings. The two walked into the house when the village chief was about to start dinner. On the table was a large bowl of potato and vegetable soup, and next to the soup bowl were 4 or 5 loaves of rye bread. 3 hungry children were sitting around the dining table. It can be seen that they must be very hungry, so much so that after Loki and Jerome entered the house, the children were still looking at the food on the table. Loki gently threw his bloody stone axe out the door. "Father, have you eaten? Oh. You said you were coming but you didn't tell me in advance. It would be better to send a pigeon to deliver a message. We can also prepare something in advance." The village chief's face was full of embarrassment, and the village chief's wife hurriedly asked the children to stand up. The 3 delicate blonde children, 1 girl and 1 child, looked at him shyly. Jerome squatted down and reached out to gently touch their tender faces. Then he took out a bag containing 40 silver coins and threw it on the table with a thud. Chapter 31 Jerome's Ambition. "I'm here to pay back the money I owe you." After the heavy purse hit the table, the village chief saw that it was filled with King Eiler III coins, dozens of them. "Your Excellency, what are you doing? 3 years ago, you helped Lindisfarne Abbey repair the collapsed roof. The villagers of Shuangshu village provided all the labor and materials. Our dean said he would pay the money back, and now it has been paid back, and last year, you helped repair the river embankment in Yorkshire, and paid for the labor to transport stones. The dean remembers every debt. Oh. Your Excellency, Lindisfarne Abbey is the house of the Holy Lord Christ. What does it matter if we provide some labor and materials? You are the godfather of my 3 children, and all the villagers in Cheshire County are one family. Haha, being one family is just what the greedy bishop said to you. We are one family when we need your manpower and labor, but this year there is a severe drought, and countless people are starving, and our respected bishop has 2 boxes of silver coins hidden in his bedroom. How could you be his family?" Of course, Jerome would not say these words in front of the village chief. "We should have settled this with you long ago, but the patriarch was worried you'd spend it recklessly. This year, the villagers are suffering from drought, and the wheat yield is only half of what it was in previous years. That's why the patriarch asked me to return the silver coins to you." "Oh. So that's how it is. Thank God. Thank you, Reverend Francis." The village chief took the heavy purse and burst into tears. "My dears, Our village is rich now. Next year, we'll have money to buy seeds." The village chief's wife stroked the children's slightly dry hair and quietly wiped away a tear. Thank you, winter is coming, and the villagers are worried about what to do next year. The patriarch is truly a kind man. Children, come, kowtow Father Jerome." The children looked confused, but they obeyed their mother's orders. Just as they were about to kneel, Jerome helped them up. "I was simply following the orders of the patriarch and doing what I was supposed to do. Ensuring the child attends church regularly every day is the greatest help I can offer." With that, he left the village chief's house without further delay, and he and Loki immediately left. Returning to the main road, they turned their horses. Jerome directed the way, and Satyr drove. Loki sat alone in the carriage, lost in thought for a long time. "Why do you say that fat, pig-like patriarch asked you to give him money?" This was Loki's biggest puzzlement. "Anyone with eyes can see that your patriarch Francis is the biggest pest in the church. Take this opportunity to eliminate this pest and gain a wave of fans. After we are gone, you can kick him out and become patriarch yourself, wouldn't it?" Loki wasn't familiar with the rank of monks within the Holy Episcopal Church, but Jerome wore the same coarse gray robes as an apprentice. If he wasn't the lowest-ranking underling, he must be no better. "Sir Kidnapper, power is not something everyone seeks," Jerome said calmly. "We are all carrying out the work of the Holy Lord, spreading his glory. Father Francis does have some flaws, but his strengths are unmatched." Before Father Francis arrived, the Lindisfarne monastery was dilapidated, impoverished, and overgrown with weeds. But after his arrival, he seemed to possess a magical power that could bring people together. "He has a voice blessed by God, and he's the most eloquent orator I've ever met." Loki's eyes widened. He was astonished at the vision of this ordinary monk. This man cared nothing for status, glory, or the fame and fortune everyone pursued. His heart was focused solely on one thing, spreading the glory of the Holy Lord. To achieve this goal, he could tolerate the less than righteous abbot. Because in the process of amassing wealth, the abbot had unintentionally achieved his desired goal. "Why didn't you run just now?" This was Loki's second question. Just now in the village, if Jerome had just raised his arm and called out, the loyal faithful would have rushed out with weapons to rescue him. And he himself was a powerful chosen one. If the villagers had all fled, he might have been in real trouble. Yet, this man did nothing. "I entered your church, robbed all your property, and even removed your most precious cross. Don't you hate me?" Jerome turned to look at Loki with a look of extreme pity, as if looking at a wounded animal. "You are demons condemned to hell by greed. If you land on this island, you must plunder our church or Father Francis. It's better than plundering hard-working merchants or starving farmers." The Buddha of the Eastern continent sacrificed himself to feed the eagles. "We have only lost this worthless gold and silver. None of our brothers have been seriously harmed, and you haven't massacred the people of Chessy County, so, you don't make me angry or wronged, I only feel deep sorrow. My Lord has mercy on you, I have mercy on you too." After saying this, Jerome's body once again shone with pure holy light. His eyes were as blue as the deep sky, seemingly able to easily see into the depths of Loki's soul. On the wall of Lindisfarne Monastery, Loki had once seen a stone mural. In the center, a ragged but radiant saint held a torch, while behind him followed a motley crew of merchants and farmers. Beneath the mural were small inscriptions. "The saint preaches, in his daily words and deeds." Could this man be preaching to these two pagans? "Haha, you're overthinking it. If I really confront you with swords and axes, I'm afraid of making too much noise. If the people outside the church rush in, it will be difficult for the seven of us alone." "No," Jerome uttered a single word. "Every word and action of ours is the will of the Holy Lord. That includes me, and you as well. Without you taking this chest of silver from the monastery, how could I possibly distribute it to the farmers outside the city? How could these starving farmers thank the Lord for his glory?" For a while, Loki fell into deeper contemplation. He wasn't thinking about the 40 silver coins he had lost, nor about the common people of Northumbria. He was contemplating the holy bishop's position in this land. Just now, at the village chief's house, Jerome had given him 40 silver coins, initially to cover the remaining payment for the church's roof 3 years earlier. What truly shocked Loki was that the holy bishop's disciples would contribute money, manpower, and labor to a church they had no connection with. Even when the church hadn't repaid them for 3 years, they preferred to starve rather than complain. To Loki, this was nothing short of a miracle. As the saying goes, one doesn't know the value of firewood and rice until they manage the household. Until you've truly been a lord, you truly don't understand how difficult it is to be a village chief. As a time traveler, Loki had lived through 2 lives, his mind filled with modern knowledge brought back from his previous one. Yet, even so, he could never imagine that in a world where everyone was impoverished and the working class generally lacked enough to eat, a religious belief like the Holy Bishop could unite the people under his command like a single thread. It's no wonder that all 4 nations in the English Isles adopted the Holy Bishop as their state religion. Life would be much easier for any monarch with such a religious affiliation to guide their rule. In contrast, the Vikings' Valhalla was simply a training school for warriors. The pirates paid, and the storm monks gave you potions. As for whether you lived or died after drinking the potion, or how to cultivate and improve yourself, nothing was said, everything depended on your own research. The result was a fragmented Viking community, a fragmentation reflected in many ways. For example, the Viking king Ashalavan Sabertooth, ruled Scandinavia in name only, but he was governed by 5 great lords, each with his own private army and vassal lords. These vassals also had their own castles and armies. Many, like Loki himself, had never even seen a Viking king in their entire lives. Thus, the Vikings were less a unified nation and more a loose alliance of 6 warlords. Internal strife and wars among the warlords were common, but the Viking king simply ignored them, or perhaps, he couldn't. As the carriage rocked, Loki fell into deep sleep. He no longer worried about Jerome's escape. He saw a glint of ambition in his eyes. This man, like himself, was ambitious. His ambition was to invade England and plunder its gold and silver, while his ambition was to preach to him and the satyrs, 2 pagans who worshipped Odin. Their aspirations were, in some ways, identical. Chapter 32 Yorkshire. The carriage traveled all night, with several people taking turns driving and sleeping, until they finally reached the King's Road before dawn. It was a tree-lined avenue flanked by massive oak trees. A slightly cool morning breeze blew after the rainstorm, carrying the fragrance of ripening rice along the road. As the carriage turned onto this road, it finally began to fill with pedestrians. There were vegetable vendors driving ox carts, rangers on tall horses, slung with spears and bows, circuses with monkeys, parrots, and other exotic animals in their carriages, and merchants with slaves carrying goods. The bustling flow of people flowed along the road in a colorful stream, slowly heading towards the nearby city. On both sides of the road lay endless golden fields. The English Isles were truly a land far more fertile than Scandinavia. It possessed everything needed for a flourishing civilization. Following the flow of people, stopping and starting, they finally approached the gates of York. According to Jerome, the city has a daily population of over 40,000, with a daily turnover of over 3,000. Pointing to an arched stone aqueduct not far from the city, Jerome then pointed to a river not far away. This was York's water supply. The entire system was based on a Roman design dating back 500 years. Several massive wheeled water wheels stood in the surging river. The river's flow turned the water wheels, and wooden barrels suspended from the massive wheels carried water from the river into the aqueducts, which then flowed into the city. In an era without electricity, the Romans' ability to devise this method of supplying water to the city was a remarkable achievement. Make way, mortals, make way, let the ambassadors pass. A few loud blasts of trumpets rang out, and the residents of the King's Avenue made way. From the end of the road came a row of knights in gleaming silver armor. They held high their banners, their background green, with a bunch of purple grapes painted on the green. This is the flag of Dragonfly Island, Jerome explained softly. Dragonfly Island is the territory of the neighboring kingdom of Wessex. It's the most powerful of the 7 kingdoms of the English Isles. Although Dragonfly Island isn't large, they produce England's finest wine. That's why they painted the grape symbol on their flag. More than a dozen silver cavalrymen, bearing banners, passed by. As they passed, nearly 10 carriages, each drawn by 4 horses, appeared behind them. But as the tallest carriage passed, the silk curtains gently parted, revealing a woman wearing a golden crown, clutching a baby. That's Princess Margaret, sister of Eller III. She married into the Beringer family of Dragonfly Island and is now the Duchess of Beringer. She no longer belongs to this country, so every year when she returns home for a visit, she must first meet with a Wessex ambassador, who then escorts her back to the palace. The rumbling carriages passed by, and behind them there were actually no less than 200 servants. These servants were wearing clean brocade robes and gorgeous clothes and walked at the back of the team. When they passed by the merchants and farmers on both sides, there seemed to be a sense of superiority in their arrogant eyes. The wine of Dragonfly Island is famous far and wide, and it can even be sold to the Tang dynasty in the east with the ships of merchants. You know, those arrogant Tang people hardly look down on any products of our English Isles. Only the wine of Dragonfly Island. I heard that their princes and nobles would pour it into the pool during banquets and use it as an air freshener. This sentence sounded as if there was some insult between the lines. But Jerome didn't care at all. In his opinion, it was normal for the Tang people in the East to look down on their products. He even felt that as long as they were willing to pay for it, it would be a great achievement. Precisely because of the ability to do business with the Tang people, the commercial output of Dragonfly Island is extremely amazing, and the residents of the island are much richer than ordinary farmers. Many ordinary people in the British Isles are proud to send their children to live on Dragonfly Island. These people are inevitably a little arrogant. Okay, Dragonfly Island, I'll remember it. Loki nodded silently. The team of diplomats walked for nearly half an hour before they all finished walking together. Loki and his 3 companions finally approached the city gate. When he approached the city gate, he found that this was actually a city without a moat. If you have to say what this city looks like, Loki felt more like walking into an open university. The city gate is just symbolic. If they don't want a queue, they can still enter the city by walking down the road and waiting in the grass for a while. This city has put all the focus of its design on looks and feels. Looking around after entering the city gate, there is an open basin in front of you. All the houses in the city use uniform brown stone walls and red spires, densely distributed around 7 streets and 4 squares. The city gate is located at the highest point of the city. After entering the city, you can directly have a bird's eye view of the entire city's floor plan and identify the destination they want to reach from the air. Loki's goal was clear at a glance. The Tang merchants' glazed tile shops stood proudly on the central axis of the city, like a dazzling gem suddenly appearing among a pile of matchboxes. Vermilion walls, emerald green glazed tiles, and complex riveted columns under the eaves. Both in size and sophistication, they far exceeded the ordinary buildings around them. Li was the first king to introduce Tang merchants into the city. 50 years ago, the kingdom of Northumbria was far from being as prosperous as it is today. The arrogant Tang people looked down on this poor and remote place and put forward extremely harsh conditions. They set their eyes on the land of the royal palace. If they want to open shops in the city, the king must give up the royal palace, and then they will build a business here. The royal guards were furious, but King Ellery nodded silently in agreement. The old king was worthy of being the founding monarch. He had long realized that Northumbria's only selling point was its excellent land resources. Our country is made up of a large area of plains. We have no shortage of food, but we lack minerals. If the kingdom wants to prosper, they must rely on the Tang people's ships and waterways to sell their goods, and then use their ships to transport resources from other continents. 50 years later, the arrival of the Tang people made Northumbria's economy take off as expected. The Celtic mountain tribes and Scot mountain tribes in the north of the kingdom wanted to buy goods from the Tang people, or sell their mountain products to merchants from Wessex. They must first come to Yorkshire and Northumbria. The continuous passage of merchants indirectly promoted the development of other fields. Along the trade routes, there are hotels, inns, carriage shops, and porters. As long as citizens of the kingdom want to work, they can support their families no matter what they do. Loki frowned. Why did this sound so much like the Belt and Road Initiative he was familiar with in his previous life? The Red Nation had used this very method to support the development of a large number of poor countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Could it be? What about the Imperial Palace, on the mountain? Following Jerome's finger, he saw that there were actually several buildings on the low hill on the other side of the basin. The combination of goose yellow walls, emerald green peaks, and a waterfall leaving from the top of the mountain was as beautiful as a postcard riding down the mountain. Several people entered the city. After entering Yorkshire, this prosperous city made Loki feel as if he had returned to the civilized world. The city's roads are paved with flat and regular breadstones. Trees, neatly trimmed shrubs and flowers are planted on both sides of the road. After entering the city, there's a row of stylishly decorated hotels. The enthusiastic proprietress stood at the door of the store to greet the guests, and the aroma of baked bread and beer wafted out of the kitchen. Sartre and Loki stared with their eyes wide open. Jerome subconsciously thought that the prosperity of the city had confused the two. Little did he know that these two people were deep-rooted pirates. As long as they enter a city, their brains will subconsciously analyze how to enter the city, how to retreat, and which targets are worthy of special attention. This is a memory deeply engraved in the genes of every pirate, and this alertness to wealth is also the foundation of their survival. "Boss, a completely open city," Sartre exclaimed in a low voice. "Whether attacking from south to north or sweeping from east to west, every road can easily run through the entire city. There are many magnificent buildings on every road. It feels like two hungry people walking into a buffet restaurant. While watching the dazzling fireworks, it feels like every dish seems worth trying. Boss, give me 500 people, float up along the river beside the city. Enter the city at night, evacuate in the early morning, and rob it from east to west. One night is enough." Not necessarily. Loki looked deeply at the huge glazed tile palace in the center of the central axis. He could see a sword-wielding monk in flowing clothes sitting cross-legged on the high eaves. Just by looking at him, Loki felt as if his eyes were stung by sword energy. The Tang people's business is located here. No matter which direction you enter the city from, it will not be too far from this glazed tile palace. It turns out that the old king gave up the palace, which not only stimulated domestic demand, but also hired a group of free thugs to sit in the city. No wonder this city has no moat or city walls. With so many sword cultivators sitting here, who would dare to enter the city and make trouble? Chapter 33 Izumo Trading Company. After entering the city, Jerome first took Loki and the other two to a shop called Isfahan. After a night of travel, he no longer had any fear for Loki and Satyr. These two wouldn't even harm the monks of Lindisfarne Monastery. They certainly wouldn't kill the residents of Yorkshire either. Although it was still early, quite a few people were already waiting in front of Isfahan. At noon, the shop's doors opened promptly, and a rich aroma of cumin wafted through the entrance. Two Middle Eastern chefs, wearing scarves, pulled out long, sizzling meat skewers from the stove behind them. They expertly sliced the meat before the crowd, adding onions, garlic, cheese, and other toppings, and then wrapped it in a soft, yeasty flatbread. Each flatbread cost 7 copper pence. Eli I loved barbecue and held an annual barbecue competition. This year's winner is Mohammed Isfahan. Following Jerome's finger, Loki saw a Middle Eastern man, his face almost completely submerged in a thick black beard. In the 8th century AD, the Tang dynasty wasn't the only powerful nation on earth, dominating the Eurasian land bridge. The Arab Empire during the Abbasid Caliphate was equally formidable. About 50 years ago, the Battle of Talas began. An expeditionary force of 20,000 men, led by Gao Xianshi, the Tang dynasty's Exegidashi, conquered Hami, Gao Cheng, and other small Central Asian states. They then encountered the Arab Empire of the Abbasid Caliphate at the Pamir Mountains. Gao Xianshi led 20,000 Tang troops in a bloody battle against 300,000 Arabs, resulting in a 5-day standoff. On the 6th day, the Karluk vassal state suddenly rebelled, catching Gao Xianshi off guard and trapped by a massive Arab encirclement. Charged forward in desperation, he brought only a few thousand Tang troops home safely. The Battle of Talas was the first defeat suffered by the prosperous Tang dynasty. After the battle, the Abbasids immediately realized that this state on the eastern continent was completely different from the Byzantines, Tibetans, and Turks they had previously battled. With only 20,000 men, they could unleash the astonishing combat power of 200,000. If this state were to become serious, they would be unable to withstand the attacks from both the Tang and Byzantines. Therefore, they quickly dispatched envoys to the Yai campaign. Emperor Xuanzong of Tang, a man of poetry, accepted the Yai campaign and halted his westward campaigns. This gave the Abbasids a significant respite. They were freed up to focus on combating the Byzantines and began expanding from Central Asia to the Mediterranean. Thus, the Arab Empire was born, spanning Asia, Europe, and Africa, with a territory no smaller than that of the Tang dynasty. Their Zoroastrianism had even been publicly labeled an enemy by the holy bishop. Even so, shops run by Central Asians still appeared in Yorkshire, ruled by the holy bishop. Jerome, a monk of the holy bishop, even led Loki and the other two through the queue. The English Isles, a nation founded on trade, truly was a very open free trade zone. Tender roast lamb, crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, was sandwiched between soft, yeasty flatbreads, accompanied by onions, tomatoes, and other refreshing vegetables, along with goat's milk cheese. The fat aroma permeated the air, leaving a lasting aftertaste. When it was finally Satyr and Loki's turn, they stood before the owner and ate for an hour. What did an hour mean? They ate every single one the owner made, as quickly as they could. By the time the hour was up, the owner was nearly dead from exhaustion. The two patted their bellies and departed, as the others stared in astonishment. Half an hour later, they arrived in front of the magnificent glazed palace. At the gate, Loki narrowed his eyes, watching the guard, his figure gleaming golden in the blazing sun. This was the first time he had seen a blood relative from his previous life in this alien world. Yellow skin, black eyes, a full set of golden armor with fish scales, and vibrant red tassels on his helmet and spear. This was the attire of Tang Dynasty soldiers from his memory. This was just an ordinary gatekeeper at an overseas trading company. His attire was no less impressive than the Dragonfly Island ceremonial guards he had seen outside the city. Two gatekeepers stood majestically at the foot of the archway, one on each side. Above the gate, inscribed in majestic Chinese characters were the words, Dadan Chuan Trading Company. Passing through the archway, one entered a picturesque landscape of pavilions and landscapes. Strange rocks, unusual trees, and clusters of exotic, delicately colored flowers. The melodious sound of a guqin reached his ears. Looking up, he saw a woman in a water-green work uniform, playing the zither intently against the azure water and blue sky. That's not right. We clearly saw the Tang Dynasty's glazed tile palace at the city gate at the top of the basin, a huge square box. How come after entering, we see nothing but sky? What kind of sorcery is this? When I was young, I studied with my teacher in Rome and witnessed the Tang people's illusions. Their skills were quite impressive. If my guess is correct, the musician playing the lute not far away is the illusionist. When we hear the music, we've entered the illusion she's created. Everything we see right now is fake. This is how the Tang people prevented petty thieves from causing trouble. Walking through the courtyard, two large rooms were neatly displayed with silk swatches, colorful porcelain, spices, exquisite Tang Dynasty tricolored glazed pottery, and more. The display room was empty. These priceless and exquisite samples were displayed in an exhibition hall-like space, completely unattended. The time traveler Loki was fine, but the satyr beside him was dazzled. The Vikings traditionally wore coarse clothing made of animal skins and coarse linen. These silks and porcelains, in vibrant or elegant colors, were the most exquisite creations he had ever seen. The porcelain was thin and translucent, and the silk felt smooth in his hands like a stream of cool, clear spring water. My dear Sartre, you'd better hold on tight. The box of silver we brought won't buy many pieces of porcelain of this quality. Selling a set of these to those Saxons would make them a treasured heirloom. Ha ha ha. Just as he finished speaking, a hearty laugh suddenly erupted from the doorway. Turning back, he saw a Tang man in a navy blue robe emerge from the doorway, laughing. It's okay, little brother. Everything you see in this hall is an illusion created by an illusionist's psychic powers. Look. With that, he snatched the disc from Sartre's hand and slammed it to the ground. The disc shattered into 8 pieces, but within 3 seconds, the middle-aged Han man reached out again, and the fragments reassembled into a disc in mid-air, flying back into his hand. Loki was shocked, but his surprise wasn't the illusion he was witnessing, but the fact that this Tang Dynasty shopkeeper could speak fluent Viking. You. Haha, please don't be offended, sir. I'm Luo Changchuan. I'm the shopkeeper of the Kent branch of the Izumo Trading Company. 100 years ago, our company paid a large sum to invite grammar instructors from all over the world to come to our lobby to train us in the languages of the Western continent. As an expatriate shopkeeper of the Izumo Trading Company, I couldn't compete for this position without mastering 7 or 8 foreign languages. I wonder what brings you here. The middle-aged man wore the professional smirk common to all shopkeepers. However, as he bowed, his long sleeve slipped from his wrist, and Loki's keen eyes spotted a triangular mark on his wrist. Looking closely, he saw the all-seeing eye symbol again. This man was actually a disciple of the Illuminati, just like Old Ward. At that moment, he suddenly understood why Mo Yiquan, the man responsible for compiling the overall map of the world, hadn't placed a blood-red stone statue of the creator within this Tang Dynasty shop. The Tang people weren't monolithic. The goals of the Izumo Trading Company and Mo Yiquan were completely different. Merchants always prioritize the interests of their shareholders, not the nation, like managers shouldering the entire country. Mo Yiquan had died at the hands of Old Ward. It seemed highly likely that the shopkeeper, Luo Changchuan, had some acquaintance with Old Ward. It was even possible that he had instigated Old Ward's assassination of Moyikwan. Not daring to linger for too long, he glanced briefly, then immediately lowered his head. "Greetings, sir," Loki bowed. A true man can be flexible and adaptable. Given his personality, he naturally preferred to wield his axe and negotiate business. But with only him and Sartre present, he couldn't be too reckless. "Sir, do you have merchandise to sell, or would you like to buy porcelain, silk, tea, or the like?" Shopkeeper Luo glanced discreetly at Loki. Loki was still wearing the same fur coat he'd worn since leaving Hanshu village. Shopkeeper Luo, a keen observer, saw in just 2 seconds that Loki's attire and demeanor didn't resemble the aristocratic son of a prominent family in the English Isles. "I'm here to do business," Loki said with a smile. Even the vampire Old Valder had the good sense to conceal the all-seeing eye tattoo on his chest. This man, however, had it tattooed on his wrist, where it could be exposed at any moment. This openness must have stemmed from a strong sense of self-confidence. The mention of business suddenly left shopkeeper Luo feeling somewhat vapid. He'd been in this position for 10 years, and during that time, he'd seen countless ordinary farmers from the Western continent trying to sell him what they considered valuable junk. The same was true for this person today. "Young man, if you want to sell something, why not just go to our pawn shop in the shopping district? Why come to Izumo Trading Company? I usually purchase goods in bulk from nobles and lords. You've come to the wrong place, someone. Show me out." He turned to leave, but Loki reached out and grabbed his shoulder. Shopkeeper Luo frowned slightly. This was already a very rude gesture in the business world. He turned back with a hint of anger and was met with Loki's smile again. "What I want to sell you is very valuable. I guarantee you will be interested. What is it?" Sartre clapped his hands gently. Shopkeeper Luo's mood gradually turned from dissatisfaction to anger. But at this moment, a loud noise came from outside the door. "Alice! Alice, why did the horse run away on its own? Animals are not allowed in the lobby. Someone, guards. Protect Lord Luo." Satyr had been a hunter all his life, and his horse training was a pure passion. The 2 horses pulling the carriage rushed in at a gallop after hearing his applause, smashing almost all the porcelain placed in the center of the hall along the way. When they stood in front of shopkeeper Luo, Satyr jumped onto the carriage lightly, and then kicked it hard. The silver cross that Loki and his men had looted from the chapel of Lindisfarne monastery fell to the ground with a clang. The cross instantly attracted the middle-aged man's attention. Chapter 34 Loki vs. Shopkeeper Luo. Having lived 2 lives, Loki understood all too well what these higher-ranking wealthy individuals desired most. 700 years ago, when Columbus discovered a new world, their primary interest wasn't the indigenous people, the minerals, or the abundant wildlife. The first thing the explorers did was to storm the pristine Aztec pyramids and bring back several exquisite crystal skulls for the queen. 500 years ago, when British explorers discovered the pyramids in the Egyptian desert, their first act was to dig in and excavate everything they could, transporting them back to England for exhibition. Not only were they gold, silver, and pottery, but even the dried mummies, even the sand encased within them, were brought back intact. And let's not even talk about the Eight-Nation Alliance's invasion of the Qin dynasty, which nearly plundered the old summer palace before burning it down. Not only will I rob you of everything, but after that, I'll set it on fire. Why? Because I've seen it all. I am the noble ruler. What I have seen, you, the untouchables, have no right to see. When assets accumulate to a certain level, gold and silver are no more than dirt in the eyes of capitalists. At their level, what they need is experience. They come to this world to see more things they've never seen before, to eat more delicacies they've never tasted before, and to have sex with more women they've never had sex with before. Delicious food is for everyone, as long as you have a mouth. Women? There are 7 billion people in the world, 3.5 billion of them, and there's no such thing as playing with them. Only antiques. These precious objects, surviving through the passage of time, are truly priceless. They are something most people never see in their lifetime. To truly appreciate antiques, one must have a deep pocket, ample knowledge, ample free time, and a little bit of luck. For this reason, wealthy merchants have a strong desire to collect antiques. Antiques that exude both rarity and nobility are especially coveted. The centuries-old cross standing in Lindisfarne Abbey is precisely that kind of artifact. Normally, these wealthy churches wouldn't sell their treasures. After all, the Tang Empire wasn't at war with the island nation of England at the moment, so merchants couldn't afford to rob openly. But encountering pirates like Loki, looking to sell stolen goods, was a different matter. Ever since the cross clattered off the carriage, shopkeeper Luo couldn't take his eyes off it. Despite this, as the head of the Izumo Trading Company, he'd been instilled with the importance of remaining calm at all times, especially when traveling abroad. He represented the face of the Tang people. No matter what happened, he had to hold his ground. He stroked his beard gently, then extended his left hand and snapped his fingers. Upon receiving the order, a maid, hidden behind the far wall, bowed slightly and entered the side room. A moment later, a slender, hunched old man entered. "Oh my goodness, another one today," the old man paused mid-sentence. Almost skipping and bounding over to the cross, he suddenly dropped to his knees with a thud. Closing his eyes, he pressed his nimble nose against the silver cross. "Iris," he murmured softly. Then, pressing his nimble nose against the cross, he sniffed almost everything. Lead rock, a hint of the salty, damp sea breeze, and a hint of fire. Hey, big cabinet. This is a Roman artifact. From the Apennines. At least 1,000 years old, not a single scent can get past my old nose. This time I've caught a big fish. Did this idiot send it? The old man spoke all these words in Chinese. But they had no idea the tall Viking standing across from them was a time traveler. Loki could understand the Chinese spoken by both of them. The silver ore used to forge this cross was mined from the shores of the Aegean Sea. Between 200 BC and 200 AD, this was the period when Emperor Qin Shi Huang dispatched pre-Qin Kigan practitioners to travel the world. According to ancient texts from the pre-Qin period, the Aegean Sea was covered in irises during that time, and the air was filled with their scent, so silverware forged in that era would have carried some of them. That's just one of the reasons. The most crucial point is the lead bedrock. This is the unique geomorphic structure of the Cassandra Islands near Athens. Only metal veins from the shallow surface thousands of years ago would be associated with this type of ore. When I put my nose close, I immediately smelled a strong odor of rock. At this point, I could almost conclude that it was correct. Finally, I also smelled a hint of salt and fire tassels. 700 years ago, the ancient city of Pompeii on the Apennine Peninsula was engulfed by a volcanic eruption and completely covered in hot volcanic ash. According to my inference, this item was most likely forged and sold to Pompeii, where it has been displayed in an open courtyard somewhere. That's why it's blown by the Mediterranean breeze day and night, giving it that hint of salt. But suddenly one day, disaster struck. Pompeii was buried in volcanic ash. This item was most likely dug out from the shallow ruins of the ancient city by Western tomb robbers. Then, after several twists and turns, it ended up in the hands of this little thief. Gu Chaofeng and shopkeeper Luo walked arm in arm, whispering as they drifted further and further apart. Later, they had already entered the adjacent side hall, and Loki could no longer hear what they were saying. But at least now he had all the information he needed. The cross removed from the chapel at Lindisfarne Abbey was indeed, as Father Francis had said, a valuable relic. Knowing this would provide strong support for subsequent negotiations. A full half-hour passed before shopkeeper Luo emerged from the inner hall again. This time, however, his smile had vanished, replaced by a look of indifference. Mr. Loki, I never imagined you could be this kind of person. He raised a finger at Loki, his face livid. In my 10 years as a merchant, I haven't seen many Vikings, but that hasn't stopped me from learning what kind of people you are from other sources. I don't know how you managed to reach Northumbrian territory, but you were so despicable as to rob a monastery and so brutally steal the cross. I never imagined you could do that. Fuck, this guy's expression changes faster than the pages of a book. I'm really fucking stupid. Loki shook his head and continued to watch shopkeeper Luo's performance. Although we are foreign merchants, Ailerii has been very kind to my Izumo Trading Company. It's neither right nor wrong for me to accept such filthy goods obtained in this way. Shopkeeper Luo spoke these words with a stern and righteous voice. Loki had never known Viking to be spoken with such emphasis and intonation. He still wore that mysterious smile. And didn't react excessively. Haha, it's okay, it's okay. He gently shook shopkeeper Luo's outstretched finger. It's not uncommon for deals to fail, but we've met today, after all. So, we're friends, right? As they shook hands, Loki once again scrutinized his wrist, confirming that the triangular tattoo there was indeed the Illuminati's all-seeing eye. Actually, since yesterday, we've been discussing whether or not to melt this thing down. We can spend it as silver coins, Just find a coining mold. Ugh, I'm such a fool. I'm truly sorry to have wasted your time on such a trivial matter. With that, he and Sartre struggled to carry the cross back to the carriage and turned to leave. Shopkeeper Luo had clearly not anticipated Loki's reaction. In his decade-plus experience as a cashier, he'd learned that thieves usually panicked when caught. Most resorted to begging and groveling for their subordinates' dirty tricks, repeatedly warning them not to report the matter to the police. In this situation, he could get the goods he wanted at a near rock-bottom price, then secure a kickback on the price he submitted to headquarters. After Loki brazenly expressed his intention to melt the cross, a subtle flicker of panic crossed his eyes. But his professionalism kept his serious expression steady. Haha, as long as I'm not frightened, then you're the ones who are. After Loki and the other two boarded the carriage, he took up his bloody axe and struck the cross with all his might. A loud clang echoed, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw Shopkeeper Luo's upright body suddenly tremble violently. Smash it, Brother Sartre. I don't think this thing can be sold. Let's smash it when we get home. It'll be easier to melt it down later. Without even turning back, the group walked straight out of the Izumo Trading Company's main hall. However, they hadn't taken 10 steps when Gu Qiaofeng, who had been crouching on the cross and sniffing furiously, suddenly appeared from the corner. Wearing a pair of sunglasses, he stood in a secret door in a remote corner of the hall and gently waved to Loki and the other two. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 Absolute Power. Loki was all too familiar with this tactic. Shopkeeper Luo, the villain, had failed miserably, and now it was Gu Qiaofeng's turn to play the villain. Hey, guys. Don't be in such a hurry to leave. Gu Qiaofeng's Viking wasn't as fluent as Shopkeeper Luo's, but Loki and the others could still understand him. The slender old man exuded agility and shrewdness. He quickly leaped to the front of the carriage, bowed gently, and then sprinted onto it. My lords, our shopkeeper is stationed in Northumbria on behalf of the Tang dynasty, and we have English spies in our shop. You said you guys walked into our shop so unsteadily. If the spies knew we were accepting stolen goods, it would be embarrassing after all. Haha, Loki laughed coldly twice. My lords, you keep saying stolen goods, as if to prove that we are robbers. I'm really screwed. Do you think we Vikings are all thieves? Conviction requires real evidence. If you can tell us where we committed the robbery, we will go with you to see the authorities immediately. These two sentences immediately choked Gu Qiaofeng. Seeing that he was speechless, Loki waved his hand to drive him away from the horse, and shouted, Go away, don't fucking interfere with my brother's work. Find a blacksmith shop to melt this cross, and we can still stay in a hotel tonight. At this point, Jerome, who had remained silent, finally understood what was going on. Loki, the Viking, was clearly not as rough as his appearance suggested. He possessed courage and strategy, even managing to outmaneuver these treacherous Tang people in business. He truly wanted to see how this drama would end. Gu Qiaofeng's mental fortitude was no less than that of Shopkeeper Luo. He had been trained since childhood to identify artifacts by smell. He was well aware that the cross in the cart was a relic of immense age and history. Forged in ancient Greece on the Cassandra Islands in the Aegean Sea, it had even survived the destruction of Pompeii. Such a treasure, if transported back to Chang'an, could even be placed in the main store as a treasured treasure. He couldn't let these two fools melt it. Slow down. Wait, he shouted, chasing after him once more. Loki smiled faintly, showing no intention of stopping, but instead quickened his horse's pace. These Tang people were incredibly arrogant, and he undoubtedly knew the value of his goods. If he didn't smear these medieval capitalists now, he'd feel a betrayal to the hungry villagers at home. But at that moment, something strange happened. Loki felt a gentle breeze pass before him. Then, his golden hair slowly fell from his head. Touching his head, he discovered it was gone. Looking back, he saw a dull black flying sword hovering less than 3 feet in front of him. The tip of the sword pointed at his throat, giving him a sense of danger. Don't move, Jerome said gravely. These are flying swords driven by sword cultivators from the eastern Tang. In Northumbria, aside from a few dragon riders, no one can stand up to them. The flying swords they wield can kill from 100 meters away, so, absolutely don't move. Loki's mindset shifted within 10 seconds. 10 seconds ago, he had naively believed that England, gleaming with civilization, was a society completely different from Scandinavia. Here, everyone observed rules and observed proper etiquette. He, the seller, and shopkeeper Luo, the buyer, both enjoyed the right to trade freely, fairly, and impartially, just as they would 1300 years later. No one would maliciously break the rules. However, 10 seconds later, when a flying sword loomed before him, he realized that for an absolute power, freedom and fairness were nothing. As long as the Tang people cared, they could openly rob people in the capital of Northumbria. King Ailari's guards dared not even fart. With a flying sword firmly lodged beneath his neck, Loki returned to the glazed hall in a manner bordering on humiliation. Within the hall, the piano music ceased, and the illusion vanished. The Tang people no longer needed to treat him with merchant courtesy, and so the hall returned to its true form. Silence, emptiness, and a rather eerie feeling filled it. Loki sighed softly. Thinking back, he realized Jerome had warned him long ago. In the carriage, he'd clearly told himself, Patriarch Francis has his strengths. It turned out that his ultimate goal in leading him to this Tang group was to use them to eliminate him. All along the way, Loki had been debating whether to risk a couple of sword blows, retrieve the blood axe from the carriage behind him, and fight to the death. But then he calmed down. He realized that the stone axe, transformed by the bloody creator, might be his greatest secret. He could accept the theft of the silver cross. But if the Tang people took the stone axe, which he had risked his life to obtain in the sunken city, it would be a complete loss. Sir, please show mercy, he whispered in Viking, but the swordsman in plain clothes and robes behind him remained unmoved. Entering the hall, he felt as if 2 fingers had struck his kneecap, and he immediately collapsed on his knees in front of the hall. A group of dark-skinned Kunlun slaves entered the shop, bound the silver cross securely with ropes, and unloaded it from the carriage, taking away Loki's remaining half-box of silver coins along with it. This blatant plunder unfolded before Loki's eyes, yet he felt a deep sense of powerlessness. Even a modest Tang merchant stationed abroad, let alone the Eastern Tang, would treat him like a piece of fish on the chopping board. But he had one last trick up his sleeve. Gentlemen, I wish to see shopkeeper Luo. With those words, everyone in the room froze in their tracks as if under a spell. They fixed their gazes on Loki in astonishment, for he now spoke in pure Chinese. Chapter 36 Volume 16. Thanks to Inner Mongolia's Ayapang for the reward. This is the first reward of this book. The melodious sound of the guqin echoed again, and a vision emerged. Shopkeeper Luo, dressed in a black robe with gold threads, sat before Loki. His expression was grim, for Loki, a crude barbarian, had humiliated him. Loki felt like a rooster approaching him, clutching a gold bar, trying to do business. I'll reward you with a handful of millet, or stew you with it, it all depends on my mood. When I'm not in a good mood, you're already dead. However, upon hearing this seemingly impoverished Viking bandit suddenly speak fluent Chinese, his curiosity couldn't be suppressed, and he decided to meet him. As the resident shopkeeper of a multinational corporation, shopkeeper Luo admitted to himself that few could surpass him in knowledge. In his half-life, he had seen countless foreigners trying to learn Chinese, but he had never heard of a barbarian speaking fluently. He wanted to see for himself. Loki's mind raced. He knew this was his last chance to turn the tables. He seized the moment and, for a few seconds, reflected on all the information he currently possessed. Shopkeeper Luo, sitting across from him, was a member of the Illuminati, just like Old Ward, who died in the sunken city too. The Illuminati was likely some kind of organization searching for the evil god 3. Old Ward had killed Mo Yiquan, who compiled the general map of the world. 4. I was the only one who knew that Old Ward was now dead in the sunken city. 5. Shopkeeper Luo, sitting across from him, had already fixed his piercing gaze on him, but Loki's brain was still a tangle of 3 different colored wires. He knew he couldn't hesitate any longer. Damn it, take it one step at a time and act accordingly. Slowly reaching into his bosom, Loki pulled out the fake general map of the world, sunken city volume he had kept close to him. Father Ward asked me to give you this book, Loki said in a deep voice in Chinese, then steadily placed the ancient book in front of shopkeeper Luo. He knew he had to maintain his inner composure. Only by performing this act well could he survive. Shopkeeper Luo was a remarkably composed man, but when he heard the words Father Valder and saw the book Loki handed him, he couldn't contain himself any longer. What's wrong with you? I'm a Viking born in Scandinavia. But as a child, I traveled the world with a Venetian merchant. I made 4 trips along the Silk Road, and learned some Tang language along the way. This was a story Loki had concocted in under 10 seconds, his brain working at full capacity. On my most recent trip back to the Western continent, a Venetian merchant fell ill and died. I lost my job and wanted to return home. Passing through Slavic territory, I saw Father Valder, covered in blood. The art of lying is 3 parts falsehood and 7 parts truth. Aside from the all-seeing eye tattoo on his body, Loki knew nothing else about old Valder or shopkeeper Luo. He could only fabricate a story about a real event he had witnessed, observe shopkeeper Luo's reaction, and then think about how to proceed. Unfortunately, shopkeeper Luo was so engrossed in his copy of a general map of the world that he paid no attention to Loki as he flipped through the pages. Seeing this, Loki felt quite helpless, but he could only bite the bullet and continue with his story. When I rescued him from the wilderness and brought him back to a Slavic village, he saw his fate was over. He gave me this book and told me to find a chance to exchange it from you. As he reached this point, he could already sense the faltering of his hastily crafted story. Trading a book for a boat. It sounded ridiculous, but he was no saint. With his mind crammed with confusion, he couldn't come up with a better story. However, Loki never expected it. Just as he said exchange, before he even uttered the word boat, shopkeeper Luo across from him flipped through a few pages and hurriedly closed the book. He summoned a skinny, monkey-like Gu Chaofeng and sniffed it with his deft nose. Gu Chaofeng looked stunned, ignoring shopkeeper Luo and dashing off into the inner hall with the book. After a long moment, a man appeared before Loki, holding the ancient book. Loki was stunned. He saw the very same armed guard standing guard at the gate. Loki watched his nose, his heart in his, afraid to speak for fear of revealing a flaw. The seemingly ordinary guard patted Gu Chaofeng on the shoulder, then flicked his fingertips. The tip of his steel spear suddenly soared into the air, soaring through the air, and pierced shopkeeper Luo's chest with one blow. A pool of blood suddenly bloomed in the pitch-black hall, blood spurting from his chest, shattering the illusion created by the zither music. But his attack didn't stop. Within 3 seconds, the spear tip had circled the hall. Shopkeeper Luo, Gu Chaofeng, 3 maids, and the illusionist playing the zither were all slain by the flying spear tip. Even the swordsman who had escorted Loki into the room had no chance of fighting back against this ordinary guard. Gnashing teeth and gazing eyes wasn't enough to describe Loki's shock. However, the guard simply controlled the spear tip to fly back into his hand. He sat quietly across from Loki, his expression expressionless, and he said nothing. This situation was clearly what Loki feared most. After an awkward silence that lasted almost 3 minutes, he was about to speak when he felt a chill on the back of his neck. Turning back, he saw the silver spear tip suddenly soar into the air, stopping less than 3 inches from his neck. Mr. Loki, after what just happened, not killing you is one of the few acts of kindness I've ever shown. That bastard Wade may be mean and greedy, but I know his abilities. How could he be killed by a mortal? Are you insulting my intelligence? Loki swallowed tremblingly. He found that this guard, of average height, appearance, and attire, whose every ounce of ordinariness and insignificance exuded a sense of mediocrity, was actually exerting a tremendous pressure on him. If his suspicions were correct, this man was the true mastermind behind the Illuminati. As the de facto ruler of a multinational trading company, he didn't hide in the comfort of the backroom. Instead, he stood erect and fully armed like a true doorman every day. This way, he could see the clients he faced firsthand and know their expressions as they entered the gate. This man possessed an extremely strong mind. Secondly, he had deliberately tattooed the all-seeing eye on shopkeeper Luo's wrist, revealing it intentionally or unintentionally with each guest's bow, thus creating a protective shield. If they truly encountered an enemy of the Illuminati, shopkeeper Luo would be the one to die. And if, in Loki's case, he possessed the true secret, he could easily emerge from behind the scenes and eliminate all witnesses. This man's intelligence was also quite advanced. As the guard began to speak, Loki felt a surge of confidence. He'd been most afraid of him remaining silent, leaving him with an awkward conversation. After all, he knew very little about Old Ward and the Illuminati. As long as the guard gave him a response, he could continue his story. Father Ward instructed me to conduct a test. He doesn't have complete trust in Tangren or the other Illuminati members. Forgive my poor acting skills in testing your identity. When the flying sword appeared, I thought shopkeeper Luo was the one I was looking for. I never thought Father Ward would tell me to find you, haha. So, the old man is alive, the guard asked, flipping through the ancient tome in his hand. Loki nodded silently. Father Ward's legacy is quite mysterious. I only know that he's practically invincible within the blood mist illusion. But he hasn't told me the specifics of his training. After saying this, the guard's eyes softened again towards Loki. There were only two possibilities for this man to be able to tell Father Wade's fighting style. 1. He had fought with the Wade. 2. He had fought alongside Wade. As a sword cultivator from the Tang Kingdom, he could see through a person's true strength with just his eyes. In his eyes, Loki was just a mortal with a slightly better constitution. Even if he was a chosen one, the weak psychic fluctuations in his body would never exceed sequence 7. There was no chance that such a person would survive fighting with Old Wade. Therefore, he subconsciously believed that he and Old Wade should be companions. Did he send you here this time to finally agree to my conditions? Conditions? Hearing these two words, Loki knew that God had thrown him another dice. He had only two answers, yes or no. In the absence of information, he didn't know what the consequences of saying the answer would be. After 1 second, he said in a deep voice, yes. Haha, I knew this old guy couldn't find the sunken city. In the end, won't you still have to come back to beg me? As he spoke, the guard put away the general map of the world, volume 5 in his hand, took out an almost identical book from his arms and placed it in front of Loki. Seeing this book, Loki's heart almost jumped out of his throat. That familiar cover, familiar handwriting. The only difference is that this book says, General Map of the World, Volume 16. Thank you all for your recommendations and collections, thank you. Chapter 37 Tang Dynasty Ship. Oh my god, what am I seeing? Volume 16. And that old man just said change, did I hear correctly? I shouldn't have. Loki forced himself to remain calm. Reaching out, he grabbed the book, shoving it into his arms without even turning a page. The bodies of shopkeeper Luo and Gu Chen, who had just flipped through 2 pages, lay on the ground less than 3 meters away. Their blood was still warm. Old Valder entrusted you with such an important mission. Does that mean he wants to train you as his disciple? Whether he's a disciple or not, I don't know. But as I said, we met in Slavic lands. I was with a lord's raiding party, plundering Slavic villages, and I met him there. It was fate. The gatekeeper stared into Loki's eyes for 2 full minutes. He couldn't detect a single flaw in his expression. There was no doubt that the overall map of the world in his hand was genuine. Gu Chen had just mentioned that his book was permeated with a scent of imperial seals and a faint aroma of blood. He could trust Gu Chen's nose. It was a pity that both he and shopkeeper Luo had seen the book, yet neither was a core member of the Illuminati. Coincidentally, they were both from the Tang Dynasty. They must die. In the Illuminati, each member was responsible for managing their own branch. Each branch had its own management style. There were wandering solitary wanderers like Old Ward, and there were also powerful, behind-the-scenes bosses like the gatekeepers. Branches were not allowed to interfere in the affairs of others, nor could they arbitrarily dispose of members of other branches. The gatekeeper didn't know why Old Ward had given the precious ancient book to Loki, nor did he want to know. But the person sitting before him was Old Ward's man. He couldn't execute him at will. That was an indisputable fact. After reading a few more pages of the Sunken City scroll, a sinister look crossed the gatekeeper's face. The Illuminati's mission is both secretive and profound. If the master hadn't given the Sunken City scroll to Old Ward, he would have already found the city, tracked down the pre-kin key cultivators within, and seized their treasures. HMPH, you old bastard, Ward. You've spent years searching, and in the end, you still can't find a way. You still have to return this book to me. Meanwhile, Loki's eyes were clear. But he was the only one in the room who knew that the map of the entire world in Old Ward's possession was simply a fragmented version crafted by Mo Yiquan. If he hadn't accidentally led him into the Sea of Fog, he would never have found the entrance to the sunken city. Furthermore, he had used the blood sacrifice seal to break the seawater. Judging by the guard's facial expression, he clearly knew nothing about the blood sacrifice seal. With just a single book, what else can I say except good luck? My mission is complete. Is there anything else you'd like me to bring back to Master Ward? Loki asked casually. If the guard hadn't spoken up himself, Loki wouldn't have known about the book exchange. With such a severe information asymmetry, the longer he delayed, the more flaws he'd expose. Receiving the book from the guard, he stood up, straightened his clothes, and didn't intend to linger any longer. Nothing more. Oh, and don't forget to tell him the sovereign is coming back soon. It should be in the next few years if nothing goes wrong. Don't forget to have him return the book to me during the Sovereign Council. After all, the value of my copy is far greater than his. If not, the guard hesitated, only saying half of the last sentence. One last thing, Loki said gravely, meeting the guard's gaze. Sir, could you lend me a ship? I'm a Viking, and I often travel the North Sea and the Baltic Sea. Father Valder said I need a disguise to conceal my true background. He said you have ships capable of sailing the oceans. Let me give you the book and then borrow one from you. Loki's eyes were open as he spoke these words, his heart devoid of fear. Once he regained his composure, he immediately brought up Old Ward and the Illuminati, using them as an excuse to carry out his original purpose. Borrowing a boat. Even with the technology in place, a wooden boat wasn't worth much silver, and for a wealthy company like the Izumo Trading Company, it was even less than a drop in the bucket. Especially since the doorman seemed in a good mood, he probably wouldn't refuse. The doorman waved his hand nonchalantly, paying no attention to his humble request. As the mastermind behind the Izumo Trading Company, his docks were always home to nearly 100 merchant ships of all kinds. These vessels busily plied the North Sea, the English Channel, and the Strait of St. George, transporting tens of thousands of tons of cargo from the inland sea to the British Isles. A single ship was nothing compared to the sunken city. An hour later, an officer brought Loki, Sartre, and Jerome to the Tangren docks. Dozens of ships were docked, loading and unloading cargo. Dark-skinned Kunlun slaves boarded the boats and loaded large wooden boxes onto horse-drawn carriages for transport to the city. The busy docks appeared crowded, yet they were meticulously organized. Walking along the shore, Loki was surprised to discover that the Tang people's shipbuilding technology was far superior to his expectations. The Tang people's common Luchuan, tower ship, had 3 decks and could carry over 100 tons. They were equipped not only with 2 masts, fore and aft, but also with the triangular masts used by 3-masted ships for steering. Stopping and starting, Loki suddenly spotted a slender, snow-white yacht among the ship's flying red flags. The ship was adorned with ornate fabrics, and a golden figurehead holding a trident stood at its prow. Seeing Loki's interest in the ship, the attendant asked in English, "Is this ship of interest to you, sir? This is the vessel of the king's sister, the Duchess of Hall of Dragonfly Island. If you like it, sir, I'll take you aboard." "Isn't this the king's sister's ship? Haha," the attendant chuckled. "In this city, as long as it's not the head of LIII, the king will satisfy us with anything we ask for. Even if you ask the old king to move the queen to our shopkeeper's room in the middle of the night, he'll do it immediately without a word." The attendant practically put his hands on his hips and puffed up his belly as he said this. Loki chuckled dryly, vaguely sensing that the attendant's words weren't too exaggerated. They'd already given up the royal palace to accommodate the Tang people, so what else wouldn't they give up? Besides, this country with a population of only a few 100,000 had achieved its current status because everyone knew that these Tang people were the gods of wealth who had led them to prosperity. Who would want to offend these wealthy patrons? In the end, Loki chose not the Duchess's slender white ship, which attracted attention due to its size, but instead a seemingly ordinary Tang dynasty ship. With a carrying capacity of 100 tons and approximately 30 berths, it was well maintained. More importantly, the captain's cabin contained a fully functional compass. This was a navigational tool developed by the Tang people after they discovered the wonders of magnets. Before the advent of the compass, Loki could only rely on the rising and setting of the sun and the stars in the night sky to determine his direction. With a compass, even under overcast skies, he had an additional method of navigation. It was incredibly practical. An hour later, as the sun gradually set and approached the sea, the Kunlun slaves hired by the Tang people loaded a large amount of food, fresh water, bedding, and other daily necessities onto the ship. Upon learning of Loki's true identity, the guard sent someone to return the half-box of silver coins that had been stolen from the carriage. However, the silver cross was not returned to him. As the sun was about to lose its last rays, Loki, Satyr, and Jerome set sail. As the ship drifted downwind, Loki collapsed on the deck, nearly exhausted. He could feel a throbbing in his temples, a sign that his brain was on the verge of collapse from overthinking. Entering Yorkshire, facing the Tang merchants, then the world's most powerful, brought him immense pressure. It felt like a naked infant facing a pack of adult wolves. The Tang people completely outnumbered him in terms of wealth, strength, and manpower. The fact that the three of them had managed to pull a tooth from the tiger's mouth, secure a ship, and escape unscathed was a result of his extreme mental shrewdness and a great deal of luck. Fortunately, Odin had not abandoned him. Not only had he secured a ship, but by chance, he had also obtained a copy of a general map of the world. He rested on the deck for a while, the evening breeze blowing gently. A light lit up in the solitary boat sailing close to the coast. Loki slowly took out volume 16 of overall map of the world from his arms. Chapter 38 Jerome's Ambition. The first emperor unified the 6 kingdoms, bringing China to its peak of power. Seeking immortality, he dispatched millions of monks to the far corners of the earth, slaying gods and refining the elixir of immortality. The first page contained the same text as in volume 15 compiled by Mo Yiquan. A lengthy and elaborate narrative followed. Loki skimmed through it, only remembering 2 points. 1. This book records an island, named Kwaishi Island by pre-Kinkigan practitioners. There was only one name, and everything else was recorded as 02. The book's compiler wasn't Mo Yiquan, but another Tang Dynasty explorer, Xiaolu. Judging by the brushstrokes on the papyrus, Xiaolu was a somewhat gay man. His handwriting was neat and elegant. The writing was immaculately clean, like printed text, with the spacing and size of each character perfectly consistent. It took Loki about 5 minutes to finish reading the first page by candlelight. When he turned to the second page, he instantly realized why the gatekeeper had exchanged books with Old Ward. This book, each page only contained a small portion of the image. Aside from the general chapter on the first page, the entire book, like a printing error, only displayed the left quarter of each page. The other 3 quarters, as if separated by a sharp dividing line, neatly cut off all information. The quarter of the page with a picture resembled Mo Yiquan's sunken city scroll, a vivid map painted in gold, silver, and cinnabar, remarkably familiar. Meanwhile, the right half of the page was entirely pristine papyrus, without a single speck of ink. Loki blinked hesitantly. If a modern printer had printed a book like this, it wouldn't be uncommon, as printers can control each ink dot to within 0.001 millimeters. But the ancients used brushes to paint these ancient books. Even the finest wolf hair brushes were only about 1 millimeter thick. The only way to conceal the left half of a page with a precision of laser cutting is to place another sheet of paper over the left page, removing it after the drawing is complete to serve as a dividing line. While it's possible, actually using this method might be feasible with a pencil, but it's incredibly difficult with a brush. The most important question is, why? A book split vertically might still be readable. After all, the lines of text run parallel to each other. Only the first half of the book allows you to at least read a section of the story, and then use the remaining half of the next page to connect to the missing parts. However, this split page method means each sentence is only a fraction of a sentence. Under these circumstances, understanding the book becomes exponentially more difficult. The Tang Dynasty text is quite flowery, and after struggling to read sentence by sentence, Loki shook his head and tucked the book into his arms. Turning back, he saw Jerome standing quietly behind him. He had clearly been there for a long time. My guess was right. You can actually read and speak Tang fluently. Staring intently at Loki, Jerome entered the cabin and pulled up a chair to sit across from him. He had already seen that Loki was no murderer, and in his presence, he felt free to be more unrestrained. Mr. Jerome, thank you for your help these past few days. Once we return the ship to Lindisfarne Abbey, I'll let you go. From now on, you go your way, I'll go mine. I promise you'll never see me again. We've had a rough day. I really need to get some sleep now, as we have to sail tonight. If you don't mind, he issued a clear order to leave, but Jerome showed no sign of leaving. Furthermore, he took advantage of Loki's fatigue to snatch the ancient book from his arms and spread it on the table. Mr. Jerome, I respect you as a worthy member of the Holy Order, but that doesn't mean you can. Jerome was halfway through his words when he raised his hands. The rich holy light bestowed upon him by the Holy Order's path of justice gathered between them. As he softly recited the prayer, the light flowed like a watermark onto the ancient scroll. Loki was astonished to discover that a pattern composed of light had appeared on the blank half of the papyrus. Thus, the entire scroll was complete. Loki was dumbfounded, but Jerome, sitting across from him, promptly withdrew the holy light. In an instant, the room was plunged into darkness again. He pointed tremblingly at Jerome, and Loki's sleepiness vanished. Mr. Kidnapper, every inch has its strengths and weaknesses. My profession is a gospel transcriber for the Church of Lindisfarne, but I was a student of the Saint Eusebi in my youth. I have seen ancient books compiled by great saints throughout the ages in Rome. A pagan in the hands of this book would be unable to discover its hidden secrets. This is because it is an ancient book compiled by a high-sequence demigod-level saint bishop. Only high-sequence powerfuls of the paths of justice and holy light could reveal the secrets hidden in the second half. Explosion was the sole sensation in Loki's chaotic mind. He finally understood why even a shrewd gatekeeper would be so intent on replacing the book in his hands. Given his status and position, he must have tried every possible method to reveal the remaining blank page. But he would never have imagined that Xiolu, the man responsible for compiling the general map of the world, the eroded country, was actually a saint bishop who had reached the demigod realm. Haha, never mind you. Even if I lived 2 lifetimes, I couldn't imagine a Tang person actually traveling to a barbarian country and converting to its religion. This kind of thing is as terrifying as a university professor from the Red Kingdom traveling to a Belt and Road African country and joining a hunting tribe. Even more terrifying is that he became a prominent official within that hunting tribe. If Jerome hadn't happened to visit his cabin, he might have spent his entire life pondering the mystery, unable to solve it. Ahem, Mr. Jerome, what do you want? Loki knew that for devout believers like them, money, women, and even life were of little importance, so he simply omitted any threats or inducements. Take me to Scandinavia, use the money you robbed to build me a church. Many of Jerome's words greatly expanded Loki's understanding. Using the money I robbed from this church to build this brother a new church in Hanshu village. What the hell? Doesn't this mean I'm robbing myself? Loki stared expressionlessly at Jerome for a full minute, finally convinced that the devout missionary wasn't talking nonsense. Vikings are a bitter, cold land. I don't need to describe how harsh the living conditions are there. Just look at us and you'll see. If the land bore abundant fruit, if the fertile mountains produced enough game to meet everyone's daily needs, why would we have to risk our lives every day raiding? Jerome's expression remained neutral, unmoved. In our village, everyone works. Without work, there's no food. You can't even imagine a Northumbrian population spontaneously sending their wealth to the church. That's impossible. In a year of disaster, the entire village would go out on long ships to plunder. Could you join us in swinging an axe, slaughtering innocent passers-by and plundering their property? Without a second thought, Jerome softly uttered 2 words. I can. Chapter 39 Harvest Season. Northumbria isn't a large country. The ship sailed along the coastline all night, and before sunrise, the group had returned to the seaside cave entrance from which they had been transported from the sunken city. The 3 remaining Vikings carried the broken sword and axe dropped by the fallen Titan, along with a crimson creator stone sculpture, hidden in the cave, onto the ship. Meanwhile, the satyr disembarked and returned to the monastery. At midnight, 10 Vikings carried silver coins and gold bars, escorting 6 teachers from the church school out of the monastery. They held axes beneath the head of Father Francis and threatened the other monks that if they heard any cry, they would slit the Father Francis' throat. After a decisive chop, they dispatched the guards at the gate, and the city issued a warning. However, it was too late. The Vikings retreated to their ships under the cover of darkness. Loki's companions had been pirates for 7 or 8 years, so these tasks were easy for them, requiring no instruction. Under the vast darkness of night, the ship set sail. The night sky was cloudless, and the stars pointed the pirates' path home. Loki sat in the captain's cabin, clutching handfuls of heavy silver coins, letting them slip through his fingers. Across from him sat Jerome. After much deliberation, he finally decided to bring this man back to Viking. First, his intuition told him that he wasn't particularly aggressive. Although he was a powerful monk, halfway to becoming a high-sequence formidable, his crude martial arts skills made him ineffective in actual combat. His fighting ability was far inferior to that of Old Ward, and even to most of the pirates around him. Even if he wanted to rebel, his abilities were within Loki's control. Compared to this concern, he valued this man's ability to illuminate the second half of the ancient tome in the gatekeeper's hand with holy light. Loki clearly understood that the greatest gain of his voyage was the inheritance of the Crimson Creator that he had obtained by chance. All of this was bestowed upon him by the ancient book in Old Valder's hands. His intuition told him that if he could decipher the second book the gatekeeper had exchanged, he could one day follow the route to the second island where the ancient gods had been sealed, perhaps even obtaining more relics from the pre-kin period. As his late father had said, strength is the foundation of success in this chaotic world. Jerome remained calm and relaxed, sitting in a corner, his eyes closed as he rested. The other monks, brought aboard from the monastery, found their lives safe for the time being and settled down for the time being. Loki felt no great fear for these monks, who were so intent on spreading the gospel. In this plane, Valhalla, the holy bishop, and other religions with different names were merely institutions akin to military training schools. Faith in these gods granted them power. The difference was that sending Vikings to Valhalla in exchange for potions required risking their lives and paying a fine. On the other hand, the holy bishop. I heard that simply preaching the gospel could increase his sequence level. If they could get some of the chosen ones for free from the holy bishop, it wouldn't be a bad idea. As the ship sailed across the vast North Sea, the most excited were Loki's Viking warriors. Although this voyage had been full of twists and turns, the outcome was ultimately a success. They busily counted their spoils, calculating all the gains from the voyage: 120 500-gram gold bars to 765 50-gram silver coins of eel III. A rough estimate of 1.5 to 2 tons of broken steel from the fallen titans in the sunken city. Over 70 gems of various colors, dug up or found from church statues, crowns, and the patriarch's chamber. There were also gold chains, silver bracelets, and stained glass. Beyond these, after Loki revealed his identity, the unassuming Illuminati gatekeeper was also quite generous to him. The ship carried not only nearly 5 tons of various commercial grains, but also a wealth of luxuries of the era, such as spices, tea bricks, whale oil soap, and Tang Dynasty Psyche pottery. The most outrageous thing was that the ship still had dozens of kilograms of black powder on board. Loki had left it there when his crew cleared the vessel for him. As a modern man, he understood the power of this stuff. He figured it would come in handy sooner or later. These goods, slipped through the fingers of the Izumo Trading Company, were also a considerable asset to Loki. Hey, brothers, this time I'm going back. I'm going to Valhalla before the snow closes the mountain. Are you going or not? Yes. Why not? A young man, his arms covered in scars, shouted. Others see a 50% chance of death, but I see a 50% chance of survival. My dad said Odin loves warriors who face death head-on. Even if I explode in the process of drinking the potion, so what? After death, I'll enter Valhalla and drink with the gods. When I'm reincarnated, I'll drink again. If one doesn't work, drink twice. If 2 doesn't work, I'll drink 10 times. I don't believe such a complicated death won't earn the gods' favor, haha. The warriors excitedly drank the ship's fine wine and counted the gold bars in their pockets in the dim light. Loki, who quietly passed by the door, didn't spoil their excitement. After all, his brothers had risked their lives to fight alongside him, and it was only right that they should be paid their due. As for how they planned to use the money, that wasn't his concern as the village chief. The gold coins he'd obtained from this voyage were truly enormous. After distributing them to his subordinates, what should he do with them himself? As Loki strolled over the side of the ship, he pondered. First, he had to do what he'd promised Jerome. He had to build a church in the village, along with a parochial school. The Holy Lord monk's preaching would help educate the villagers. This would be a win-win situation. Secondly, the village seemed to need a blacksmith shop. For a long time, Hanshu village had only one carpenter, Sangji. Anyone who wanted to make swords, rivets, or anything like that had to go to the neighboring village of Blood Pigeon. This was too much trouble. Especially since he needed to build more ships in the future, a blacksmith shop was essential. After completing these 2 tasks, there would undoubtedly be some silver left from the looting. Loki would have to start thinking about how to improve the villagers' fighting power. Should he buy some wargs from the mountain folk of Wolf Creek Bay and train them as wolf riders? Or should he buy some yaks from the frost people of Frost Rain Castle and train them to become yak riders? He still needed to think about this question. Loki didn't agree with the act of sending a large number of people to Valhalla to drink potions and gamble their lives. There were only 170 people in Hanshu village, too few to afford such a waste. The journey home was unusually peaceful. Only a full moon hung high on the calm sea, and the moonlight shining on the sea made Loki's lonely ship seem extremely lonely. Standing at the bow, he could only feel that the wind was getting colder and colder as the ship sailed east. And pieces of floating ice began to appear on the silent sea. This meant that he was approaching the Scandinavian peninsula. Hometown was just ahead. Chapter 40, Unusual Movements in Hanshu Village. Boss, wake up, something seems amiss. Feeling a pair of large hands repeatedly nudging his shoulders, Loki opened his eyes and sat up in bed. What's going on? Rubbing his sleepy eyes, Loki glanced out the nearby porthole. Outside, the sky was a pale gray, with fine snowflakes drifting down. After a day and 2 nights of sailing, they shouldn't be far from Hanshu village. Boss, you should check out the bow. Something seems amiss. After getting dressed, Loki hurried to the bow. He realized the ship had already entered the bay, with Hanshu village just over 10 kilometers ahead. But the entire village was silent, not a sound. Something was wrong. It was definitely not right. At this time of year, with the sky this bright, it should be around 5:30 in the morning. Normally, the cooks in Hanshu village would be up and working. In the Middle Ages, the brick ovens used to bake bread and meat took ages to heat up, and by now, plumes of smoke should be rising from the chimneys of Hanshu Castle. But not only was there no black smoke rising from the distant castle chimney, not even the steam from the heated baths was visible. Rushing to the top deck of the ship, Loki rummaged through the cabinets in the captain's cabin and retrieved a glass telescope. Made in the Byzantine Empire, it boasted a magnification of about 6 times. He peered carefully through the telescope at the village and found no one moving about. This was even more strange. The villagers should have been feeding their livestock at this hour. After putting away the telescope, Loki paused to think. First, he ruled out the possibility of an invasion. If fighting broke out in a Scandinavian Viking village, it could only be caused by other Vikings. Even if civil war broke out among the nobles of the river valley under Duke Bernard, no one would plunder the impoverished village of Hanshu. Everyone knew it was a desolate, barren place. Second, his journey had taken over half a month from departure to return. The possibility of a widespread epidemic wiping out the entire population in just over 10 days was unrealistic. After all, Hanshu village boasts a large, 24-hour bathhouse. While other villages in Loki may not be able to compare, Hanshu village's sanitation is practically unmatched in Scandinavia. Excluding these 2 factors, the only possibility remains. Imagine attempting to rob a fully loaded cargo ship. Standing on the dock, fully armed, waiting for the ship to dock is unlikely to yield a positive outcome. If the captain sees something fishy going on, he can immediately turn and flee. Therefore, most ship raiders don't do this. Instead, they quietly lurk within the village, silently subduing the inhabitants. A village chief, returning home after months at sea, finds his village as quiet as a grave. Most people would immediately speed their ship back to the village to investigate. Once docked, the ship is no longer theirs. Only one powerful individual could subdue the inhabitants of Hanshu village with virtually no resistance. That individual is Duke Bernard, the sole lord of the valley and the true master of Hanshu village. Brothers, has the ship stopped? It stopped steadily, boss. Okay, listen to my orders. All the valuables in this operation, including gold bars, silver coins, and steel obtained from the sunken city, including the bloody stone statue. Throw them all into the sea. Boss, don't waste time, throw them now. We don't have much time. Turning his head, Loki showed a stern expression to his subordinates for the first time. I don't know who leaked the news to our Lord Duke, but our Lord Duke Bernard is in Hanshu village right now. We'd be courting death if we drove back with a shipload of gold and silver. So everyone must empty their possessions of all the gold and silver. Aren't there spare sails under the cabin? Use the sails to wrap up the gold bars, silver coins, and the steel and statues found in the sunken city. After a few days, when the storm subsides, we'll organize people to salvage them. This is a shallow sea, and this huge sail on the seabed will be a big target, so we should be able to find it. If we just blindly approach the shore, all these things will become the Lord Duke's. Hurry. Don't hesitate. Loki's face was solemn, leaving no room for negotiation. With these 10 axes, they had absolutely no chance of winning against Duke Bernard's private army. This risk could not be taken at all. Remember, the most important thing is that no one should have a single silver coin on them. If the Duke sees one, we won't be able to explain ourselves. Boss, where's the food? Sartre asked gravely. Forget the food. Once it's soaked in seawater, it'll be inedible. Give it to the Duke, but take these explosives. Wrap them tightly in oil paper and throw them in. Hurry, we only have 15 minutes. If we delay too long and the Duke on shore sees us, we'll be in trouble. After explaining the seriousness of the situation to his subordinates, he sprinted under the ship and found Jerome and the other holy bishop monks. "We've run into a minor problem. I didn't inform my duke of this voyage. I don't know who tipped off my lord about my departure. He's waiting for me in the village ahead." Loki hadn't mistreated them these days. Instead, he treated them well and respectfully, serving them hot tea and meals daily. The monks weren't afraid of him. According to Viking custom, if a vassal sails without permission, 70% of the proceeds belong to the lord. Since I didn't notify him before setting sail, I'm likely to leave with nothing. If you go out to see him in these monk's robes, it will be difficult for me to explain, and it will be difficult for you to save your lives. Therefore, I need you to change into Viking clothing. Most importantly, I need you to remove the cross from your chest and throw it into the sea." Loki's voice trembled as he spoke these words. He knew how difficult this would be for the people before him, but in his heart, these teachers were worth no less than the gold and silver sunk to the bottom of the sea. "My village reported to Lord Bernard that there are 170 of us. 10 died in the last raid. You have 7 between you, so the number is about the same. He's the lord, with 4 vassals under his command, and Hanshu village is the smallest. He doesn't have the ability to remember everyone. So if you want to survive, please cooperate. If any of these crosses are found by the Lord's ships, it will be a disaster for all of us." The monks exchanged glances, and Jerome was the first to remove the holy cross from his neck. Only then did those around him notice its magnificent silver cross. Placing the cross, given to him by the Saint Eusebius, against his forehead, Jerome muttered a few gospel prayers, then tossed it out the window into the vast ocean. Chapter 41, Duke Bernard, thanks to Deccan Zanfang for the monthly ticket. The ship slowly approached the harbor of Hanshu village. Just a few hundred meters from the shore, with a soft splash, a row of spikes suddenly rose from the water behind the ship. This was a common Viking method of blocking the river. A ship trapped by this makeshift dam made of old vines and wood spikes would be like a turtle in a jar, unable to retreat to the sea. With the spike dam rising, the numerous ambushers in the village no longer concealed themselves, and they filed out of Hanshu fort. Leading the way was Bernard, Duke of the River Valley. He looked quite old. To hide his age, Bernard had shaved off all his graying hair, revealing 3 scratches running across his face. The scratches ran from his mouth, past his eyes, and extended to his forehead. It was said that these were the wounds he suffered in his youth when he fought a brown bear. These grim wounds, combined with his venomous, sinister gaze, gave him a constant appearance of danger. Surrounded by a group of chosen ones, he walked out with a gentle wave. Slaves wheeled 2 massive crosses out from behind the house. Tied to them were 2 blood-soaked figures. They were the village carpenter, Sanji Marish, and his father, Gor Marish. "Boss, what am I saying? I noticed something was wrong when that old fellow entered the city. When he left, I noticed his car tracks were even deeper than when he entered. Think about it, he came in to sell goods, so why would his cart be 3 times heavier when he left, and he didn't leave early or late, but waited for dawn to leave in the dark? If I hadn't gotten up early to pee, I might not have seen him." The one who had reported this to the Duke was the gatekeeper at Storm's End. He followed the Duke closely, his words spitting and nagging. At that time, I felt that there must be something fishy in the old man's car. Then I followed him all the way and lurked at the gate of Hanshu village. The next morning, I saw a big ship departing from the bay in front of their door. This is what I saw with my own eyes. It's all true. Look, they are back today. Duke Bernard waved his hand lightly to drive away the flies around him. The reason why this man was so active was that he was also carrying a lot of pressure. Shortly after Loki and his men set sail, he ran back to Storm's End to report to the Duke. The Duke immediately arrested Sanji and Gor, father and son, and whipped them for more than 10 days in a row. The 2 were beaten to pulp, but they did not confess a word. Many vassals around Bernard had gently reminded him not to take things too far, as this might be a personal grudge between the young gatekeeper and the Marish family. Such words made the loyal gatekeeper feel uncomfortable. And today, Loki's return ship finally appeared. As long as he took out the anchor engraved with the forging mark of Marish from the ship, he could prove his loyalty to the Lord. He was not making up stories or arbitrarily accusing others. The ship slowly approached the shore. Loki led his companions down the ship. Seeing Lord Bernard standing nearby with an indignant expression, Loki smiled, opened his arms, and was about to exchange a few words. Blind Mountain Blood Pigeon of Blood Pigeon Town, standing beside the Duke, stepped forward and gently shook his head. "Loki, how dare you?" another noble beside Bernard shouted at him. It was Loki's neighbor, Lord Swain Gonk of Fogduck Town. To obtain a ship without reporting it to the Lord and to sail without permission will result in being thrown into a snake pit and devoured by the snakes. Don't you know that? He, Loki, freshly disembarked, looked relaxed, unfazed. "My respected Duke Bernard, is this how you treat a loyal subordinate, and why are you whipping my villagers for no reason? You still have the nerve to ask why." The informant guard stood up first. "I saw you order Sanji to go to Storm's End to buy an anchor. Why did you buy anchors for no reason? Aren't you going to build ships and go out to sea privately?" "What the hell?" Loki walked up to the guard with a look of grief and indignation. "My lord, this is the most ridiculous slander this year. You said I bought an anchor? How about we make a bet? If there is an anchor made by old Marish on the ship, I can commit suicide immediately and give you the cold water village. But if there is no anchor, I need you to dig out your heart and stew it into soup, so that the Marish and his son can be nourished. How about it? Do you dare to bet?" Loki's cold and serious face instantly stunned everyone present. Seeing that he made such a big bet with a righteous heart, the city gate guard also became a little hesitant, and only then did he realize that the ship in front of him seemed to be different from the one he saw going out to sea that day. Am I hallucinating? The hesitation of his subordinates made Duke Bernard a little embarrassed. He asked his subordinates to control all the crew members who got off Loki's ship, and then signaled Blind Mountain beside him to lead people to rush into the ship to search carefully. After a while, Blind Mountain and the warriors of Blood Pigeon Village beside him came up carrying a huge wooden anchor. "My lord, this is the only anchor found in the ship." The faces of the warriors around Bernard collectively became a little amused. Most of them had been to the Conqueror's fortress and had seen the Tank People's ships. Only the Tank People would use ironwood to make anchors, and this material did not exist in Scandinavia at all. The city gate guard's face changed instantly, but the facts were before him, and he could not find any room for explanation for a while. Unfortunately, Loki had no intention of letting him go. "My lord, I want to ask you," he stretched out a finger, pointing sadly at the dying Sanji on the cross, "is this person a resident of my valley?" Duke Bernard's face was stiff, and he did not answer the question. "According to Viking etiquette, if anyone hurts my people without reason, I have the right to challenge the perpetrator to a duel. So now I want to ask, who is it that hurt my people just now? You fucking hurry up and stand up." Loki's eyes burned with the flames of battle. He slowly pulled the blood-red stone axe from behind him and gently shouldered it. A faint blood-red mist seeped from his body, and in just a few seconds, his entire body turned almost blood-red. It was a sign of blood rushing rapidly, indicating that the patriarch of the Sterrig family was fully prepared for battle. Everyone in the field turned their heads to look at Duke Bernard, who was standing opposite Loki. He himself took a step back slightly. In his youth, he had been a respected Viking warrior, but with age and rising status, he had not personally taken up arms in battle for many years. Although he was still the chosen one of the Berserker path. Facing the warlike Loki, he still subconsciously wanted to escape. Even more deceptive was the informant guard. "My lord Duke, what are you afraid of? Pick up the axe and fight him. Let this guy see who is the most powerful warrior in the valley." He shouted and danced like a noisy toad, attracting hopeful glances from all the guards around him. The Vikings were martial, and everyone was looking forward to a bloody fight. Especially since one of the two fighting parties was a duke, and the other was a noble. Just thinking about this kind of scene makes people's blood boil. The more passionate the crowd was, the more Duke Bernard felt that he couldn't take action. When he had nothing, he swung his axe to fight without fear, because he had nothing to lose. Now he has everything, he can't lose, and he can't afford to lose. Pulling out a golden axe inserted in his waist, Bernard raised his hand and slashed. However, the axe was not aimed at Loki, but at the city gate guard who had his back to him. After a muffled sound, thick blood splattered on the ground. The city gate guard widened his eyes in disbelief, but immediately died. After Duke Bernard's statement, Loki, his eyes bloodshot, repeatedly took a breath, finally waking from his bloodlust. Seeing Sanji and his son hanging on the cross, covered in blood, he had truly lost control for a moment. "My lord, I discovered an empty, unmanned ship on the sea. Unsure if it's maneuverable, I let a few of my people out to sea a few days ago. I wanted to report back to you immediately. As you can see, there's no loot on board, and there were only a dozen of us out there. Sanji went home to visit his family and his old father. He didn't buy anything from the blacksmith shop, no swords, no anchors, nothing. Hanshu village is a small village. We have absolutely no intention of looting. And as you know, with just a dozen of us, we can barely manage this ship. Do you think we'd even go and rob Slavs? Duke Bernard didn't know what to say after the repeated questioning. He looked at Loki with eyes as sinister as those of a venomous snake. Loki looked back at him without fear. The morning breeze died down, and the air between them solidified like glue. For a long while, no one said another word. I was sent on a business trip this afternoon, and I should update twice a day until I get home. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42, Death of Ahei. A moment later, the heavily armored warriors of Storm's End leaped from the ship. Duke Bernard looked over at them, and the horned man in the lead, a large man, shook his head slightly. What had happened here was indeed a misunderstanding. The Duke has already executed the rumor-mongers for you, and the Loki brothers have pledged their loyalty to the Duke. This is a misunderstanding. Everyone, please disperse. Blind Mountain Blood Pigeon, the young patriarch of Blood Pigeon Village, had a close personal relationship with Loki. Seeing that Loki had stabilized the situation, he hurried out to mediate, giving both sides a way out. Brothers behind you, quickly take Marish and his son off the cross and carry them back to the house. Blind Mountain's words carried weight with the Vikings. After all, he was a chosen one of the Sea Giant path, and at his age, he had already reached Sequence 7 Wavabreaker. It was only a matter of time before he would ascend to higher sequence powerhouse. Over the years, Duke Bernard had grown to respect him. His words were practically the Duke's own. But just then, Old Gunk, the Lord of Foggy Duck, roared, "Wait!" He rolled his eyes, cold as a dead fish, and slowly approached the several holy monks in Loki's group. These brothers look so unfamiliar. Why haven't I seen you before? When did you arrive in Frostwater Village? Foggy Duck wasn't far from Frostwater Village, but it was nestled in a valley on a peninsula. Foggy Duck was inhabited by Viking mountain folk. Unlike sea folk, mountain folk didn't fish or sail, but they lived off the land. They were skilled climbers and runners, larger in size, and more powerful in battle. Swain Gunk, Lord of Foggy Duck, had long harbored a single desire, to annex Frostwater Village and secure access to the sea like Blood Dove. When Loki's biological father was still alive, he invaded Frostwater Village several times, but each time he was met with fierce resistance from the warriors of House Starlag. Even his two sons died in the invasions. 2 years ago, Loki's father had passed away, and he'd thought his chance had finally arrived. However, he hadn't expected that Coldwater Village, under Loki's management, would become increasingly difficult to conquer. Old Gunk, having lived for most of his life, had a remarkable sense of shamelessness. He'd often come to Loki's village on his wildebeest, looking around and searching for any strategic opportunities. He'd been there so often that he knew almost everyone in the village by heart. But he'd squinted and observed the few who disembarked today, certain they were new to him. Seeing the monks spotted by the cunning Gunk, Loki's heart leapt into his throat. He quickly drew his axe and blocked the monks' path. He had to be quick, as they spoke no Viking. "Gunk, you old dog, I'm really giving you a damn good. Are you the one questioning someone from my village? You, and you, go help get Sanji off the scaffold. What are you still standing there for?" Seizing the brief window of opportunity, Loki quickly dismissed the monks behind him. Jerome understood his intention perfectly, dragging a few of his brothers with him to the cross to help, pretentiously. Only Gunk, clad in a black robe, stared after them, his voice still shrill and sinister. "Brother Loki, you're only 20 after all. I'm just kindly reminding you not to neglect your duties. Who knows, we might be invaded by foreign spies. A man without hair on his lips, a man without power is not an old saying. You, a young man, have become the chief of the clan. The Duke worries about you every day." Gunk, a veteran of 50 years, spoke these 2 words with ease, killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only did he explain his leisurely visit to Hanshu village, he also went on to defend Duke Bernard from his lynching. Finally, he subtly warned everyone around him, "This kid is just a young, reckless brat, and everyone is welcome to step on him whenever they want. Loki wanted to chop the old man down with an axe in front of everyone, but after all, everyone was watching. He had to put aside any grudges until Duke Bernard's chosen ones left. The villagers of Hanshu village brought Marish and his son inside for emergency treatment. The Duke and his companions' attention was quickly drawn to the Tang dynasty ship. Unknown ships drifting on the seas were not uncommon in Scandinavia. The Baltic Sea is a long, narrow inland sea, often carrying all sorts of objects and vessels alike. However, this exquisite Tang dynasty ship was a first for Duke Bernard. It had 3 decks and a carrying capacity of over 100 tons. Most importantly, the ship's hold was filled with a wealth of Tang dynasty goods. You know, these teas, spices, silks, and the like were usually only found in the conqueror's fortress, where the Viking king resided. My lord, this is a gift from the god King Odin. Yes, the Duke has just won his 4th wife. This is a gift from the gods of Valhalla. You are a beloved figure in the eyes of the gods. Everyone surrounded the Duke, and no one even offered a word of greeting to Loki as he returned to the ship. Except for Blind Mountain. In a secluded corner, Blind Mountain grabbed Loki and said, besides Marish and his son, who were seriously injured, several gatekeepers were also lashed by the Lord for refusing to let anyone pass. They suffered some physical pain, but their lives are not in danger. The Noah came down from the attic and tried to argue with the Lord. The Lord, embarrassed, lashed him a few times, but spared his life because he was a storm monk. In the end, he had Mayor Gonk tie him up and carry him to the attic. Brother, be careful. I feel like old Gonk and the Duke are deliberately targeting you. Winter is coming, and this is your last chance to recover. We must find a way out this winter. After these words of advice, Blind Mountain didn't dare linger. Just an hour later, numerous nobles accompanied Bernard aboard the luxurious ship and set off for home. The people from Blood Pigeon Town and Fogduck Town also mounted their horses and retreated. As the sun set, the devastated Hanshu village was returned to its inhabitants. The snow-covered ground was littered with scattered footprints. The village gate, shattered by the immense force, had shattered into 6 pieces. The 3 guards, whipped to the ground, were left with wounds and lacerations. After applying herbal remedies, they developed a high fever. They wondered if they would live to see the next spring. Worst hit were Sanji and Old Mangor. Both had once selflessly helped the village, but now their skin was torn and ripped. Even after carefully cleaning and bandaging their wounds, they were still breathing weakly. Both were on the verge of death. Loki scowled, uttering no words for almost the entire afternoon. He felt a tightness in his chest, as if a huge rock was blocking it. The weight of the rock made it impossible to breathe or even think. He tried to bathe in the hot springs on the ground floor of Hanshu village, but he discovered that the water had been soaked in by the pirates associated with Duke Bernard, who hadn't bathed in 3 years. It was now a pool of muddy water. Unable to shower, he went to the castle's dining hall in an attempt to eat, only to find that the Duke and his men had devoured most of the winter rations he had painstakingly loaded in the past few days. This was the final straw. Loki returned to his room, baring his chest and roaring at the snow outside. He longed to wield his axe and slaughter Gonk, Bernard, and all of them. But this wasn't a game, nor was it some sappy online novel. It wasn't realistic. Rage flushed his body crimson. He could feel his heart pounding, the surging blood rapidly pumping through every inch of his skin, and a faint blood color mist began to rise from his skin once again. Just as he felt himself about to lose control, a cold hand suddenly touched his shoulder. Turning back, he saw it was Ahe the seer. After being saved so many times by the crow, Loki no longer dared to look down on Ahe. He bowed respectfully to the sage, and Ahe smiled kindly. The raven, who had saved his life so many times, perched on his shoulder, gently licking his hair. Doubtmonger, remember what I once said, a tree that stands out in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. I witnessed your descent into darkness, but I never imagined that from that darkness you would find light. I can sense that my mission is complete. You no longer need me. Suddenly, a hand reached out to Loki's forehead. Loki saw only a large hand covering his vision. When the darkness receded again, he was in a dark basement. The sewage from the baths had been drained away, leaving only Marish and his son, along with 3 members of his tribe who had been whipped. In the pitch darkness, a pure holy light suddenly shone. Upon closer inspection, it was Jerome. His monk's robes had been removed and thrown into the sea. He now wore the linen robes that Loki had stripped from Zuhizi in the sleeping city. He wore a plain white garment, chanted prayers, and gathered holy light in his hands. He looked exactly like the Holy Lord Christ from Loki's previous life. Specks of pure white holy light streamed from his fingertips, flowing onto the grievously wounded. Their wounds were healing rapidly. Looking back, he saw the withered form of the seer Alhe, slumped to the ground like a leaf. Blood slowly seeped from his body. Lifting his black robes, Loki saw his aged body ripped open, his wounds no less severe than those of Sangji. "Help! Help!" he cried shrilly, but the old body in his arms was as cold as ice. It seemed as if he had already died. End of Volume 1, and so ended Volume 1. Qingli was a newcomer, unfamiliar with the formulas and writing based on intuition. If there are any shortcomings or mistakes, please feel free to point them out. I will strive to write a better second volume. Chapter 43 Winter Salvage. Crystal clear snowflakes slowly drifted across the vast frozen sea. Loki, Blind Mountain, and a group of Viking warriors crouched nervously beside an ice cave, tightly gripping the ropes in their hands. A dozen logs lay piled on the frozen surface, a bonfire burning fiercely. The flames were fierce, but no one worried about burning through the ice. Winter had arrived, and the sea was already a meter thick with black ice. "Boss, give Little Green 3 more minutes. If she doesn't surface, you'll have to pull the white rope to pull her out." The speaker was an old Viking with white hair and beard, warming himself by the campfire, draped in a huge bearskin. The old man's name was Jude, a navigator of the Blood Dove Town pirates. As a chosen one of the sailor path of Valhalla, he was an exceptional swimmer. However, winter swimming requires physical fitness, and his age meant he couldn't match the strength of the young men around him. He could only hold out for 5 minutes after entering the ice cave. He could see the box of silver coins lying quietly on the seafloor, but he couldn't swim that far. After 3 minutes, "She'll most likely freeze to death down there. It's not worth sacrificing a chosen one from the Siren's path for a mere box of silver coins." The old man had been out of the ice cave for some time, but now his hair and beard were all ice, and his entire body was shrouded in a layer of ice. Loki glanced nervously at Blind Mountain beside him. He knew Blind Mountain was even more nervous than he was. Because beneath the frozen sea, Green was not only the chosen one of Blind Mountain's hunting team, but also his newlywed wife. "Brother, why don't we just forget it? We pulled most of our treasure from the seabed yesterday. This box of silver coins is just a few that slipped through the canvas. We can still rob if the money's gone, but not if the person's dead." He tugged at the white rope beside him and was about to pull, but Blind Mountain reached out to stop him. "After all these years, you still don't know what kind of person your sister-in-law is," Blind Mountain said with a wry smile. "I tried to persuade her all night yesterday not to take it, but she's such a money grubber. If even a single silver coin gets lost, let alone a whole box, she'll go down to the sea and retrieve it. If we pull her back today, haha, I'll have no good winter. By next spring, if this box of silver gets lost to the sea, she'll kill me with a knife. I'm scared. I'll let her do what she wants." Blind Mountain Blood Pigeon was a majestic sea giant outside, but at home he was docile as a cat. This was an open secret even among the chosen ones of the valley. Since Blind Mountain had said so, Loki had no choice but to wait. If only they had come to salvage it sooner, a nearby hunter from Blood Pigeon Town muttered. How could Loki not know such a simple truth? It was a pity that Duke Bernard was a man of meticulous attention. A full month after leaving the village, spies from Storm's End frequently appeared on the hills surrounding Frostwater Village. Loki remained silent, dormant for a full month until the snow closed the mountains, and the spies finally disappeared. After waiting for nearly 10 minutes, a movement finally came from beneath the ice cave. A long stream of bubbles emerged from the cave's entrance. 10 seconds later, with a soft rustling sound, a pale figure, like a snow-white python, emerged from the ice cave. Vapor rose from her body, and against the sunlight in the frozen sea, she looked like a crystal-clear, beautiful statue. Her name was Siren Glynn. However, the Viking warriors of the river valley nicknamed her White Jade Beauty because her skin was as white as the flawless white jade sold by the Tang people. Seeing his naked sister-in-law standing before him, Loki blushed and quickly took off his bearskin to cover her. But Green didn't take it. Instead, she smoothed her hair, revealing her perfect feminine curves. "Hey, Lord Loki, how can you still look like this when you see a woman? Are you still a virgin?" Loki's neck was twisted almost to a 90-degree angle, on the verge of breaking. He braced his hands on the bearskin, trying not to look at or touch his sister-in-law's warm body. "That won't do. How about letting my sister-in-law and Blind Mountain teach you a lesson one day? Blind Mountain laughed beside him, and Loki dropped the bearskin and hurried away. After 20 years of traveling across time, he still found the Vikings' terrifying group sex culture extremely difficult to adapt to. In this terrifying group, many men were happy to share their wives with friends as long as both parties agreed. In many cases, they didn't even know whose children they were raising were, but they didn't seem to mind. A flu, a famine, or even a wild hunt could kill these children at any time. Who would bother to make so many distinctions between you and me? Loki's embarrassed expression brought laughter to the surrounding Vikings. Meanwhile, Glynn simply smiled, brushing off the ice beads and giving her husband a sweet kiss. His wife's joy clearly indicated she had found the silver coins. With a definitive answer, Blind Mountain shouted, "Brothers, pull!" Soon, a heavy metal chest was hauled ashore from the seabed. Despite their freezing cold, the Vikings gathered around the chest. When the lid opened and the gleam of silver coins appeared, everyone gasped in amazement. Today's hero is Sister Glynn. I declare that Hanshu village will not share this chest of silver coins. This final chest is my gift to Sister Glynn. Loki glanced at the people around him, and the pirates of Hanshu village nodded in agreement. Everyone could see that the siren Glynn had risked her life to retrieve this chest of silver coins from the seabed. Oh? Master Loki is so good to his sister-in-law. Do you secretly like me? Hearing this, Jelin moved closer to Loki again, wrapping her arms around his broad shoulders. The bearskin on her body slowly slipped off, revealing her curvy, wide and tender body. At this moment, Loki even wanted to jump into the ice hole himself to see his embarrassed look. Jelin gently kissed him on the cheek, chuckled, and covered her body again. Whenever she had the chance, she always wanted to tease her thin-skinned brother. You, Hanshu village, risk your lives to make this fortune, while we in Zooge Town just put in a little effort and took half from you without shedding a drop of blood. Your eldest brother and I are already very embarrassed, but everyone knows that my money-grubbing bastard father-in-law is not a straightforward person. How could he not accept the silver you gave him like this? We in Blood Pigeon Town haven't paid anything, yet we've received so many benefits from you. Your elder brother and I don't know how to repay this kindness. There's no way I'll ever accept this last box of silver. Jelin stood barefoot on the ice, yet she already had the air of a leader. She scolded his father in front of Blind Mountain, and the burly Blind Mountain elder brother didn't even dare to fart. I'm afraid the Lord of Blood Pigeon Town will choose this woman over his honest, brawling elder brother. Little brother, you saw it too. The old man must have felt embarrassed today, so he didn't even come. I'm making the decision. This last box goes to Hanshu village. Anyone have any objections? No. That's right, elder sister. I think so too, echoed the others. Blind Mountain hurriedly pulled his wife aside and helped her get dressed. He actually felt that what Jelin said made perfect sense. Blood Pigeon Town had paid nothing, yet for no reason, it had gained benefits equivalent to 2 autumn raids. This was already a bonanza. Taking money from Hanshu village would be a bit unreasonable. Meanwhile, Loki no longer refused. After all, they were still standing on the frozen sea, where the temperature was over 40 degrees Celsius below zero. If he spoke any longer, his tongue would freeze. I won't refuse any more. The brothers of Hanshu village thank Sister Jelin for the gift of prosperity. Let's talk over drinks back in the village. Honestly, I feel like my balls are freezing. Let's get home. Pulling the silver coins from the seabed undoubtedly brought joy to everyone. They warmed themselves by the fire, then packed their bags, formed a single line, and walked back to Hanshu village through the blizzard. Autumn had passed, and winter had just arrived. I've been away on business these days, so I haven't updated much. For those of you short on books, I recommend steady, don't be reckless. As the author, I always kneel down before I even start reading. It's damn good. Chapter 44 Hanshu Village Cathedral. Deep down, Loki wasn't happy about giving half of his painstakingly earned silver coins to Blood Pigeon Town. But what could he do? His village had no food reserves and needed to be rebuilt. He could wait until spring to salvage the silver himself. While that would yield all the silver, at least 70% of Hanshu village's population would have starved to death by then. He had to salvage the silver coins this winter. It was the only way. Relying solely on Hanshu village's Viking hunters wasn't feasible. Loki dropped the silver coins into the sea 1,000 meters from the coastline. The seabed there was 100 meters deep. A normal person would freeze to death in the 0°C ice water mixture before reaching the bottom. To salvage the silver coins, he had to seek help from the chosen ones of neighboring Blood Pigeon Town. While this would cost him a significant portion of the silver, it also offered two advantages. First, it would secure an ally. Among the vassal states of the river valley, Blood Pigeon Town was the largest and Duke Bernard's most powerful force. He dragged Blood Pigeon Town into the water. At least, if Duke Bernard were to hold him accountable in the future, it would be better to bundle Blood Pigeon Town and Coldwater Village together than to single out Coldwater Village for punishment. Secondly, Loki needed to use Blood Pigeon Town to win over other factions and cultivate his own forces. The Vikings had long believed that there was no continent west of the North Sea. This concept was instilled in them by their rulers and was a means of domination. Even the conqueror's fortress of Viking King Sabertooth O'Sullivan had tang merchants. At this time, the earth was steadily moving towards globalization, driven by both land and sea silk roads. If the lords still firmly believed that there was no continent west of the North Sea under such circumstances, they were fools. Why didn't the Viking lords seek a westward passage? Loki believed there were two possibilities. 1. The North Sea. On the westward journey, the English weren't a formidable threat. The formidable one was the North Sea. The North Sea was over 3 times the width of the Baltic Sea, making crossing the sea significantly more difficult for the Vikings in their simple longships. Crossing the Baltic Sea eastward, 10 out of 10 ships would surely reach the other coast. But if 10 longships set out into the North Sea, how many would reach the English Isles? If luck wasn't on their side, a storm could easily wipe them out too. Contentment with a small fortune. This generation of Viking lords had no ambition to dominate. Their sole goal was to rule the desolate Scandinavian peninsula, a goal easily achieved by occasionally heading east to raid Slavic towns. Under these circumstances, there was no need to risk their entire families on the fate of their nation, risking their entire fortunes and lives on a safe passage through the North Sea. In the vastness of the ocean, even the slightest misfortune at any stage could lead to complete loss. Yet, throughout dynasties, the aspirations of rulers were not necessarily aligned with the needs of the people. In the minds of feudal rulers, making the people suffer seemed like a low-cost option. People were the last thing feudal rulers lacked. As long as a man and a woman are together, whether they are rich or poor, they will produce more people. What does people really mean? But the people themselves don't see it that way. Throughout history, people have sought to make money and raise their children in a more prosperous and secure environment. When Loki revealed to Hummel Blood Pigeon, the current mayor of Blood Pigeon Town and the father of Blind Mountain Blood Pigeon, the mayor scoffed and dismissed the idea. However, when Loki pulled out an LRII silver coin hidden in his shoe and told him there were thousands more lying on the seabed, the old man became restless. "If you help me fish it out, I'll give half to Blood Pigeon Town." Upon hearing this, Hummel's blood pressure soared. He organized a group of people overnight to weave ropes to break open the frozen sea. The next day, he personally led a team to the harbor. Seeing his excitement, he even considered jumping into the ice hole and fishing himself. In that instant, Loki saw clearly that with just a wave of his hand, all the village chiefs, big and small, would be willing to follow him to the rich English Isles to pan for gold. All he needed was for Old Man Hummel to spread the word to the other village chiefs. There's a rich land west of the North Sea. There, even a young man from Hanshu village, barely grown, could plunder vast quantities of gold and silver with just a dozen men. Hanshu village's weakness meant Loki had little say. But Old Man Hummel's words had a different effect. The following autumn, if he could control the people's support, he wouldn't be afraid of Bernard's next move. Returning to Hanshu village, he once again rejected his sister-in-law's enthusiastic request for group sex to warm up. Hastily escaping her embrace under the pretext of inspecting work, he scrambled out of the bath, put on his clothes, and walked out of the castle, letting the icy winds brush against his chest. He needed to use this gust of cold wind to quickly erase his sister-in-law's warm body from his memory. This was horrible. If he continued this way, he wondered how much longer his virginity would last. Shivering slightly from the cold, he quickly headed towards the eastern part of the village. Despite being the dead of winter, the place was bustling with activity. The silver coins he had salvaged from the seabed a few days ago had been exchanged for lumber at Storm's End by the villagers of Blood Pigeon Town. Saint Bishop Jerome was directing Sanji's work with a roll of papyrus. Several monks who had come with Jerome to Coldwater Village were enthusiastically helping. After a month of forced study, they were already able to communicate in simple Viking with the villagers of Coldwater. The saying that one's surroundings are the best language teachers truly rings true. Hey, brother, it's almost done. Look, it's almost dark, and you still want to build a church in 3 days? Impossible. After a month, Jerome and Loki quickly became close friends. Especially after he used holy light magic to help the injured Sanji and his son recover, he immediately gained the friendship of all the villagers in Hanshu village. Work harder, and the school can open soon. My goodness, you can't imagine what I saw yesterday. A pair of brothers were practicing swords in the narrow garden, and a 5-year-old child followed suit with a steel knife. Several times they almost cut the child. That's not the worst. The worst is that after the fight, the two men were covered in wounds. They let the blood drip from the wounds into cups, mixed it with strong liquor, and drank it all. Not only did they drink it themselves, but they also gave it to the child. They said they wanted grandchildren soon. That half-grown child, who's not even your age, is already thinking about becoming a grandfather. My holy lord. I have traveled around with my teacher and have seen many barbarians, but none of them are as scary as you Vikings. Jerome looked disgusted, but Loki laughed and patted his shoulder vigorously. He still remembered what Adhe, the knower, said to him before he died. You entered the darkness, but found the light. This is really true. I have indeed found the light. Loki looked up at the church under construction. This building cost him 1/3 of the silver coins, and it is the largest building in Hanshu village except for Hanshu Fort. The entire church battlefield area is about 1,000 square meters, with 1 underground floor and 3 floors above ground. The church is equipped with classrooms, dining halls, chapels, monks' dormitories, etc. The specifications are built in full accordance with the standard chapel required by the Roman Catholic Church. Even the 12 saints required in the church. Jerome drew a sample drawing for the carpenter Sanji and asked him to carve it carefully. Loki approved all of Jerome's requirements. In his opinion, the villagers have nothing to do in winter. Instead of letting them get drunk every day, it is better to go to the church school to learn about the culture, writing and mathematical algorithms of the Western continent. Therefore, this building must reflect its importance. If he, the village chief, does not attach importance to education, how can he trick the villagers under his command into picking up textbooks? I heard that you drove out the woman I assigned to you again? This is not right. Loki whispered in his ear, those rough old Slavic men are stupid and disgusting, but their women are big, slender, white, and first-rate. The other monk brothers are comfortable every night. Why do you still look like an old scholar? You said you are in my remote place, and no gods in the sky can see you, so don't be so tense. Turn off the lights at night and just kill time. The population of Hanshu village is really too small. When they were poor, they might need to control fertility, but now that they are rich, he hopes that every man in the village will take action immediately. The women given to others are fine, but the Slavic girl given to Jerome was selected by Loki himself. She has big breasts, thin waist and long legs, and her face and figure are all standard metal frames. Jerome turned his head with disdain and pushed Loki's big face aside. Haha. Every night I don't have enough time to copy textbooks for the children. How can I have time to waste time with a woman? I pushed that woman away because she snored like a pig when she fell asleep. It interfered with my work. If it is really because of the shortage of housing and there is no place to sleep, please send someone who sleeps quietly at night. It is better than that Slavic woman whose voice, body odor, and physical desires are like those of an animal. You are awesome. Loki was speechless and really didn't know what to say. Please give me a recommendation vote. Chapter 45, Tempering Marish's Rebirth. Crossing the village, Loki arrived west. If there was one person in Frostwater village he felt most guilty about, it was undoubtedly Sanji's father. Poor Marish. Despite being whipped innocently by the Lord, at least on the surface, he appeared innocent. He refused to return to Storm's End. Despite repeated attempts by Duke Bernard to persuade him to stay, Old Gore's temper was as unyielding as his hammer. He was tortured on a cross by Lord Bernard for 3 full days, beaten to the point where practically no skin remained intact. But he uttered no plea for mercy, not even a cry. After Jerome healed his wounds, he never set foot in Storm's End again. Even the move to Frostwater village was accomplished by his apprentices. The sign for the Quenching Marish shop was crookedly nailed to a drafty makeshift shed. Inside, several high-temperature furnaces stood, all improvised by Old Gore within a month. The cramped cabin in Hanshu village simply couldn't accommodate his furnace, inkstone, and other forging equipment. Therefore, he had his men build a makeshift shed out of wood, working outdoors. Quick! Throw in the scrap metal. Maintain the furnace temperature we set, and make this batch of weapons as beautiful as the last. Old man Marish's bare arms were covered in scars. But his Viking physique, enhanced by Jerome's holy light spell, had restored him to health within a week. He was smelting the scrap iron Loki had salvaged from the sleeping city. Pulling it from the seabed, old man Hummel unearthed it and discovered a pile of broken weapons, resembling glass. The wealthy blood pigeon town had no need for it, and even transporting it back was too much of a hassle. Therefore, the entire pile of raw iron was left to Loki. It wasn't until old man Marish tossed this humble metal into the furnace back to the village that the people of Hanshu village realized its extraordinary qualities. This black iron was forged entirely from the shattered weapons of fallen titans. This material combines both strength and toughness, forging axes that are both strong and sharp, yet resistant to brittle fractures. The knowledgeable old man, Gore, immediately recognized the extraordinary qualities of this steel. Working day and night, he had already crafted nearly 100 Viking axes. Brother Gore, aren't you tired? Take a break. After quenched Marish overran Frostwater village, Loki had accomplished his first feat as lord. The impoverished Frostwater village had never seen a blacksmith shop as prestigious as this. During Loki's father's reign, villagers who wanted an axe would have had to travel dozens of miles to Blood Pigeon Town. Now, that was no longer necessary. Brother Loki, this is some impressive steel. I heard you got it from some ruin somewhere. Old Gore wiped his sweat from his forehead and took a deep gulp from his nearby water bottle. Loki gestured for silence. After all, the less people knew about the sunken city, the better. The stone statue of the bloody creator was in his bedroom. He hadn't yet fully explained its origins to the rest of the village. I know, but it's a secret. Old man Gore placed his arm affectionately around Loki's shoulders. I just wanted to ask you to take me out for a walk next time you go out to sea. Staying cooped up on this desolate island all day is driving me crazy. Brother Gore, how old are you? Can you still pick up an axe and chop people down? Haha. You're still that old. I had Sanji when I was 12. Actually, I'm not much older than that good for nothing. Don't be fooled by the way he's always fiddling with a piece of wood. I'm nothing like him. Look at my arms, and then look at my legs. With a swish, he leaped onto the inkstone, revealing his sturdy arms and long legs. His skin was covered in cuts and axe wounds, all inflicted by Duke Bernard's whip and iron rod. Loki couldn't bear to look at it any longer. He had long heard from Sanji that his father had a restless heart. Now, it seemed, his words had become more restrained. Brother Gore, all right. You come down first, and don't hurt your back. You and your son have already proven your loyalty to the village. Next time we go out to sea, if you want, I'll take you, Loki promised, contentedly leaving the blacksmith shop. Ever since the sound of smithing echoed daily in the village, Pete instinctively wanted to check it out. It felt like buying a new Audi in his previous life. Hanshu village had taken another big step forward. After leaving the blacksmith shop, his next stop was the kitchen area on the first floor of the castle. After digging up coins from the seabed, Loki used the silver to buy a plentiful supply of meat and ale. For the first time, the villagers of Hanshu village enjoyed a winter with bread, roast meat, and ale every day. Laughter echoed daily in the village's canton. Busy in the kitchen were the women abducted from the Slavic village last month. After being brought back to the village, the loot was handed over to the steward, Ventsov, for distribution and care. Unlike other villages, Hanshu village never treated outsiders as slaves. This was partly due to Loki's insistence, but also because Hanshu village's population was simply too small. Only by uniting every living soul in the village could they quickly replenish the forces lost in the war. Life in Hanshu was undoubtedly far better than their previous life in the Slavic wilderness. The women quickly learned the Viking language and actively participated in village life. Especially since they were distributed to the monks from Lindisfarne monastery, the Slavic women's faces had been glowing with excitement lately. Haha, good food and drink every day, a warm cabin to sleep in, and a pink, virgin boyfriend. If it were me, I'd be so happy too. What's for dinner today? He reached over to the stove and gently tapped the pot of rich soup. The broth nearly brought tears to his eyes. 20 years later, 20 years after traveling through time, my village can finally afford spices. These dusty powders, so cheap as dust in a previous life, are now incredibly expensive. In the Western continent, even a common spice like pepper is sold by the gram, just like tea. My lord, today we're making ginger potato soup, oatmeal bread, and roasting 330-kilogram blue sheep. The chef was Fafna, the wife of the chief steward, Wenzov. Fellow Slav, she and her fellow Slav sisters worked harmoniously together. Roast 3 more. We have guests from the neighboring town of Blood Pigeon today. It was all thanks to their labor that we were able to salvage a whole box of silver coins from the seabed. Other things are fine, but we can't lose face eating them. Don't forget to bring 2 more barrels of ale from the cellar. With the over 1,000 gold coins looted from Lindisfarne monastery, Loki didn't have to worry about accounting. The 3 blue sheep were marinated with a generous amount of oregano, sage, and rosemary, and their rich aroma filled the room. In these impoverished medieval times, this was the taste of the wealthy. At the kitchen door, a dozen little hoods huddled together, peeking in. Loki pulled out his small knife and gently cut off a crispy leg of lamb for the children. Outwardly, Slavic children looked much the same as Viking children. Children's worlds were pure and innocent. Classism was absent in Hanshu village, and after just a few days of playing together, the children had become like a family. Seeing Loki appear, they reached out like hungry wolves, grasping at the fragrant lamb leg. Hey, have you washed your hands? A row of white, delicate hands appeared. Lately, with sufficient nutrition, the children's skin had begun to develop a healthy glow. What did I say when dinner was served? Ladies first, the children replied in childish voices, pushing the girls next to them closer. These rules couldn't be taught when food was scarce, but now that life was prosperous, they had to be taught. Snow fell heavily outside the window, while the fireplace warmed inside. A woman's soft laughter echoed from the kitchen. Loki sat nearby, watching the growing children, their eyes curved into crescents, tearing off chunks of barbecue with their greasy little hands and stuffing them into their mouths. At that moment, a sudden surge of pride rose in his heart. After enduring hardships, Hanshu village had finally taken its first step towards a moderately prosperous life. Chapter 46: A New Crisis. At the same time, 500 kilometers away, at the docks of Storm's End, snow fell heavily, and a biting north wind blew. All the ships at the dock were frozen in the ice. Yet, Duke Bernard, Lord of Storm's End, sat in the captain's cabin of his massive ship, gently stroking the icy sea non. Since acquiring this ship, Duke Bernard had spent a short time aboard it daily, no matter how cold it got. Winter had arrived, and the low temperatures had dampened his urge to sail. He could only feast his eyes on it daily. For the past month, he had touched every component of the ship with his bare hands. He had seen the tank people and their shops in the Conqueror's fortress. But the proud tank people refused to allow these Viking white ghosts near their ship. Now, observing it up close, he could only see the ship's architectural mastery. The ship had 3 decks. The upper deck housed the captain's cabin, offering a bird's eye view of everything. The middle deck contained bunks for 50, along with a kitchen, fireplace, and armory. The lower deck could carry 100 tons of cargo. Furthermore, after playing with this exquisite toy in the captain's cabin for nearly a month, he finally discovered its secret. No matter how he turned the large iron spoon, the handle would always point north. With this on board, who needed a navigator to find the way? A chill breeze blew in through the porthole. Duke Bernard pulled out his iron kettle and gently sipped the milk tea inside. The ship had also brought along the remaining Chinese goods to Storm's End. Among them was the tea bricks, a favorite of everyone in the Duke's residence. This black powder, boiled and mixed with honey and milk, not only warmed the body, but its smooth taste was like a cloud of mist passing through the mouth. As night fell, Bernard dismissed all his subordinates and let the darkness envelop him. As he aged, he felt his body grow older, and even his mind dulled and slowed. In recent years, only sitting alone in the darkness could restore his youthful sharpness. He had once paid a large sum of money to see a tank physician at Conqueror's fortress. They said it was the result of countless battles in his youth, a rush of blood and anger, and the constant drinking. Age is an incurable disease, the physician concluded. This statement frightened Bernard like a bird on a tether. As a Viking, the slightest sign of fatigue could turn his lackeys into ferocious wolves. He had gained his dukedom by taking advantage of the old and frail health of the previous Duke of Riverdale, Sulk Frostbeam. He didn't want to follow the old Duke's path. Therefore, he forced himself to think daily. For the past month, this ship had been a source of great concern for him. That day in Frostwater Village, The bustling crowd and the overwhelming joy of discovering the ship had dulled his vigilance. In a flurry of excitement, he sailed the ship back to Storm's End, not even considering the profound incongruity. First, the ship was too new. According to Loki, it had drifted from the North Sea. Empty ships drifting on the seas have indeed happened before. But those empty ships, drifting for months on the ocean, weathered by the wind, are never in great condition. But this ship was different. The wood was dry and smooth, the nails were rust-free, the tungsten gleaming compass in the captain's cabin was equally untouched by the wind. Furthermore, the cargo within the hold showed no signs of decay. The rice and flour were fresh and dry. Even the papyrus wrapping the tea bricks was unbroken. Compared to all this, the most significant flaw was the quality of the tea bricks within the hold. Loki claimed that this ship had drifted to Hanshu village on the North Sea. While it was common for lords to spread rumors that there is no land in the West, Bernard, as a provincial lord, knew the Western continent like the back of his hand. Chinese ships sailing the North Sea had only one destination, the conqueror's fortress. So, the question was, why were the tea bricks within this ship such top-quality goods, not even sold in the conqueror's fortress? Years ago, Bernard had tasted black tea of this quality at the Viking king's palace. The stingy princess would have poured a little tea from the bottle cap for each of their lords. The Tang people wouldn't ship anything in bulk to the conqueror's fortress, knowing the impoverished Vikings couldn't afford it. And yet, this ship contained over 400 bricks of first-rate black tea, nearly 20 kilograms. These bricks alone were worth thousands of Slavic silver coins. Not to mention the equally high-quality spices, silk, and Tang dynasty Psyche porcelain vases in the hold. Bernard would have believed this cargo was bound for Paris, the luxury capital of the Western continent. But if it were drifting in the North Sea, a story Bernard, now sober, simply didn't believe. His intuition told him the most likely scenario was that Loki and his crew had secretly built a ship without his knowledge. Since there was no blacksmith in Frostwater village, they contacted Gormarish in Storm's End and purchased one from him. They then set sail, somehow drifting to England across the North Sea. These 11 men were incredibly lucky. Upon landing, they captured a Tang ship without a fight. The 11 couldn't manage 2 ships to return, so they resorted to sailing back on the Tang ship, only to collide with themselves at the dock. Duke Bernard initially believed this to be the truth. However, when the steward brought him the market accounts in recent days, he discovered something quite unusual. Blood Dove Town, adjacent to Coldwater Village, had purchased nearly 100 tons of timber, over 20 tons of meat, and a large quantity of spices and wheat flour from him in just 1 month. This shopping spree had nearly emptied Storm's End's remaining winter reserves. The currency used for settlement wasn't O'Sullivan's saber-toothed silver coins or the Slavic silver coins customary among Vikings, but rather a roughly melted and broken silver bar. Taking one from his pocket, Duke Bernard held it before his eyes, examining it in the moonlight reflecting off the snow. It was an extremely crude silver bar. Such crude craftsmanship was a blasphemy for a precious metal like silver. Such crude workmanship could only mean one thing: the blacksmiths had to forge this stuff in large quantities. They didn't even have time to use delicate molds. They simply formed the silver into plates, then used a guillotine to cut it into strips like frozen beef. How did Bernard know this? Because when he was a minor noble, he had done the same thing behind the old duke's back. The old duke was old and frail, his mind failing, and he was completely unaware of this. He didn't want to follow Duke Sulk's path. Could it be that these roughnecks from Hanshu village had reaped the greater benefits? They were throwing silver coins into the sea near the coast, and recently had been collaborating with Blood Pigeon Town to fish them out, then using Blood Pigeon Town to purchase supplies on a massive scale? As soon as this thought entered Bernard's mind, it pierced his nerves like a rusty nail, causing unbearable pain in his brain every day. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the true story. If this were the truth, then he'd completely wronged the gatekeeper who tipped him off. He'd killed the loyal gatekeeper with a single blow of his axe, while the perpetrator was still at large. Bernard felt a sudden pang of sourness rising in his stomach. With a groan, he vomited all the milk tea he'd just drunk. His hands clenched into fists, shaking violently. This trembling was fueled by anger. Blood Dove Town was easy to deal with. After all, no one wouldn't be tempted by profit. But this Frostwater village, this shabby village of less than 170 people actually wanted to rebel against me. Come on, he shouted. Return to the city, and send a raven to summon Commander Swain Gonk of Misducktown to Storm's End within 7 days. I won't make it to the new year if I don't take over Frostwater Village. Thank you, brothers, for your rewards, recommendations, and monthly tickets. Thank you, thank you. Chapter 47 Darth Gonk of Snowgrave Valley. 3 days later, outside Hanshu Village, in the Snowgrave Valley, in the vast night, several Hanshu women, wrapped in thick sheepskin jackets, carried several animal hide bags. Walking under the starlight, they walked a dozen miles out of the village and dumped the garbage in the area known as the Snowgrave Valley. Why is village chief Loki so fussy? Leftover bones from every meal are collected from every household's trash can, and then taken so far away to be buried. What's the point? The woman carrying the animal hide bags was a young Slavic woman. Her Viking language was still rudimentary, but it still had a strong Slavic accent. Hey, sister, you're new here. The village chief calls this cultivating hygienic habits. Looking across Scandinavia, no town is cleaner than our village, the older Viking servant spoke with pride. The village chief said they're planning to organize the entire village to build some kind of drainage pipe next spring. Once the frozen ground softens, he's a very capable man. We all believe he's the reincarnation of Loki, the god of wisdom. You'll understand after living here long enough. By the time the 4 women reached the outskirts of Snowgrave Valley, they were shivering and practically shaking. It's too cold. How about we just dump it in the snow? Yes, sister, another Slavic woman said, her feet bouncing wildly with cold. We'll handle all the garbage this week anyway, so we can just dig a pit and bury it on the weekend. Would that be just as effective? The middle-aged woman leading the group was clearly overwhelmed by the chill of Snowgrave Valley. Okay, let's bury it on the weekend. But you have to remind me, or if the village chief finds out, we'll all be punished. I don't want to have to take out the garbage for 2 extra weeks in this damn winter. With that, the women emptied their hide bags and hurried back toward the village behind them. Fine snowflakes drifted from the sky, and within minutes, the exposed garbage on the snowy ground was covered in a blanket of white. But just then, a figure, clad entirely in a pitch-black wolfskin, emerged from the nearby conifer forest. From the soft snow, waist-deep in the soft snow, he gathered the women's discarded garbage, dumped it into a coarse cloth bag, and waded back into the woods. His name was Dasquonk. After walking nearly 400 meters, he had returned to the rock cave above Snowgrave Valley. This was a traditional refuge for Viking hunters during their winter outings. Hidden within the Rocky Mountains on either side of Snowgrave Valley were rapidly surging hot springs. These heated the rock walls, preventing the sticky snow from lingering on them. Over time, the falling snow slid down into the canyon, earning its name, Snowgrave Valley. Dasquonk yanked off his wolfskin and emptied the garbage from his coarse cloth bag. A pile of animal bones fell from the bag to the ground. Another figure in the cave approached, reaching out with a withered hand and gently twisting a bone. He was none other than Swain Gonk, Lord of Misducktown, summoned by Duke Bernard. A man's mouth may be full of lies, but a village's garbage is the most honest. Old Gonk was already quite old, his voice hoarse as a steel saw blade, but his eyes gleamed with wisdom. Hanshu Village, where food was scarce and people died of starvation every winter, now eats mutton every meal. Not only that, they're actually spitting out the bones. Damn. The landlords have surplus food, and even eating has become a luxury. In the Middle Ages, the poor could only eat meat a few times a year. Many families with more comfortable means would collect bones and boil them in a large pot for 3 days, reducing them to a soft, crumbed crumb. The crumbs were incredibly filling, making them the perfect winter satiator for the poor. Dad, I knew it. It must be Greenland who gave Frostwater Village the help they needed again. Otherwise, with Old Man Hummel's incredibly stingy nature, he'd only give them a few bags of warm meat and potatoes. How could he possibly let these lowly people eat meat every meal? And how dare they spit out bones? That bitch Greenland rejected my advances because of that pretty boy Loki who got on the way. At the Duke's banquet, I could even see the lust in her eyes for him. She's never looked at me like that, the swarthy Darth Gwink complained bitterly. After Old Gwink's eldest and second sons perished in the attack on Frostwater Village, he was the only surviving male of the Gonk family. A mountain dweller, he stood over 2 meters tall, his build as strong as a tower. 3 years ago, he entered Valhalla and drank the Berserker's Path potion. He was currently at Sequence 7, Frostland Hercules. According to the Storm Acolytes, he was just 1 step away from Sequence 6, Skullcrusher. I don't understand. How am I any worse than blind mountain blood pigeon? That idiot, besides fighting, does nothing but giggle. He's a sequence 7, a sea giant path. I can tolerate losing to him, but I can't stand losing to some pretty boy from the Starrig family. Darth grew increasingly angry, clenching his fists. He's not even the chosen one. How could he possibly have Miss Green's favor? What's even worse is that he's always trying to evade her. I really want to hide him. Pin him to the ground and crack his skull. With nowhere to vent his anger, Darth punched the nearby stone wall. His fist actually punched a small hole in the scorching stone. Warm spring water gushed out, taking a long time to freeze. Swain glanced coldly at his son. As a rare sage among Vikings, he knew his youngest son's character all too well. But now, he needed this simple-minded idiot, filled with jealousy, to fight for him. My son, large-scale fatal combat is forbidden among Viking nobles. This is a rule set by Olaf the Bloody Conqueror, the founding Viking king. But centuries have passed, and no one cares whether this rule still exists. When the Duke summoned me to Mistak, I have a feeling he's finally tired of this brat, Loki, and is about to declare war on Coldwater Village. 10 years ago, at the advice of the great sage Nibru, he refused to give Loki the armband. Even then, I knew we would inevitably go to war with Coldwater Village one day. We subsequently attacked Coldwater Village several times, but the Duke turned a blind eye. When the old village chief was still alive, we couldn't break in, but now, Loki is the only remaining member of Coldwater Village's Starlag Boiling Blood Warriors. Will the Duke still let them run amok? Swain rubbed the animal bones on the ground vigorously. Then he kneaded the broken bones into powder and threw it into the bonfire in front of him. The flames exploded with a bang, but immediately faded into dim ash as if it was poured with a basin of cold water. Darkness. It's darkness, Swain said in a deep voice, and then laughed. As the chosen one under the Raven Path, although he did not reach the divine power of Sequence 5 Ahe, the essayist, the Sequence 7 Ash scholar still gave him the right to observe the oracle through the flames. The Raven made him see the darkness, which must be that Hanshu village will perish under the impact of his army. He didn't even consider that he might be destroyed by the hands of Hanshu village. Brothers, let's keep going. The sooner we meet the Duke, the sooner we can occupy the sea outlet that our ancestors dreamed of. After saying this, Swain waved his hand, and nearly 200 mountain warriors holding axes walked out of the deep cave one after another. This was the entire force of Fogduck Town. Even if the Duke did not send out any troops, he would be able to flatten Coldwater Village with these 200 people. He had a hunch that their purpose this time was not to plunder, but to exterminate the clan. Chapter 48 Blood Pigeon Town Intelligence Network. The cunning Swain Gonk knew this was a move that could change the fate of Fogduck. To maintain secrecy, he led his men on a journey of 7 days and nights, braving temperatures as low as -50 degrees Celsius. Finally, before sunrise on the 8th day, they quietly entered Wind's Rest. Aside from a few guards at the gate, no one knew they had even entered the city. However, after the group entered the city, one of the new guards slipped into the toilet, evading eyesight, claiming diarrhea. With trembling fingers, he pulled a letter written on sheepskin from his pocket. Mr. Huss, I'm Green, the siren of Blood Pigeon Village. You should have heard of me. Along with this parchment is an LRII silver coin. This coin comes from the English Isles, west of the North Sea. This is my welcome gift to you. If you want an extra 10, you can report to me every noble army that enters the village. Once I have the information, I'll immediately give you 10 silver coins. Of course, 10 is too little. It'll only last a year. If you get an extra 100 silver coins, find out who this lord is, how many troops he leads, and what he discussed with Duke Bernard. I'm sure you'll have your own ideas. The more detailed the information you gather, the more silver coins Miss Green will generously give you. We'll even take you on our ship to the English Isles next autumn, so you can have the chance to personally grasp a gold bar with your own hands. Don't ask how I got to the English Isles. The silver coin in your hand is proof. Think carefully, and don't let me down, Green. The guard squatted on the toilet, carefully examining the silver coin in his hand in the bright moonlight. The silver coin, along with the sheepskin, had been given to him by a roadside merchant on his way home yesterday. He had been tempted for a long time since returning home, but he hadn't expected that just one day later, he would witness a massive army marching into Wind's Rest at night. What should he do? Should he betray the Duke? The veteran felt his hands trembling slightly. As a Viking, who didn't love silver? And the heavy coin in his hand was clearly different from the crude Slavic coins. Not only was it larger, but the craftsmanship was clearly superior. The king's portrait was engraved in the center, and the edges were surrounded by unfamiliar letters and wheat-shaped decorations. He had never seen such exquisite silver coins in his life. Holding this coin, he felt a firm belief in England's existence. After squatting for a while, his legs felt numb. He stood up and pushed the door open, but at that moment, the main door to the toilet opened and a group of guards entered, all holding sheepskins and silver coins. You too. The guards looked at each other, but within seconds, they squatted by the window and betrayed Duke Bernard. Damn it. I've been guarding the gate my whole life, and I've had enough. I've been sitting here like a fool every day. Not only do I have no time to practice martial arts, but they don't even take me with them on their raids. It's been 10 years, and I've almost become one with this gate. Yeah, I've been guarding it for 5 years too. I've been guarding it for 3 years, damn it. Who wants to guard the gate here forever when they have this chance to get rich? I've seen through that old bastard Bernard. Who among us brothers is more loyal to him than the old captain? But what are the consequences? I diligently informed him of the situation, faithfully fulfilled my duties, and in the end, the Lord choked me in the back with an axe? Damn it. That bastard didn't even have the courage to fight the old captain head-on. What kind of hero is he? The burly gatekeeper at the head spoke these words in righteous indignation, and his companions nodded in agreement. Lord Bernard didn't look like a warrior at all. Many people in Wind's Rest Fortress disliked him. There are 4 of us. Simply sending back the message and getting 10 silver coins wouldn't be enough for us. If we want to do this, we might as well go big. Does anyone have relatives working at the palace? The guards exchanged glances for a moment. Then, a wooden door creaked open from the deepest pit in the latrine, and a trembling old man emerged. I have. The guards recognized him. He was an old Viking who lived outside the city and often spent the night near the gates after drinking heavily. He slept on the streets in the summer and in the latrines in the winter. My daughter is a palace maid, and my son-in-law is a chef in the kitchen. If those 2 aren't enough, my father-in-law is a horn player in the Duke's banquet hall. These 3 can definitely help you get the information you need, but you have to give me at least 10 of the 100 silver coins. No, 15, haha. More than 100. Next spring, I'll board a ship to England and return with dozens of gold bars. The guards laughed. After searching high and low, the iron shoe finally found its way home. Faced with such a large sum of silver, the lowly laborers of Storm's End instantly abandoned their loyalty to the Duke. Unbeknownst to them, these 5 individuals, whose names would never be recorded in history books, would become the first stepping stones on the path to the new Viking king's throne. As Sweyn Gwynk led his private army into the city, the winter sun slowly emerged from the horizon. The mountain warriors of Foggy Duck had already fallen into deep sleep, but Gwynk and his son could not. They urgently needed to meet with Duke Bernard and learn his will. Duke Bernard met with the 2 men at the breakfast table. Maids stood in a neat row, holding silver trays upon which lay smoked chicken, grilled fish, and lightly browned white bread. On the other side of the table, another row of maids held copper trays filled with milk, black tea, honey, and other condiments. Brother Gwynk, how long have we known each other? Duke Bernard peeled back the shell of an egg and gently placed it on the plate across from Sweyn Gwynk. There were only the 2 of them at the table, with Darth Gwynk standing behind his father. He wasn't a lord, so he wasn't qualified to sit at the table. Let me think. The first time we met was 37 years ago. That year, the previous generation of Emperor O'Sullivan sent troops to capture the Frost Ridge on the back of the peninsula and rule this continent. If I remember correctly, you were 14 and I was 12. Duke Bernard chuckled and took a sip of black tea. Isn't the wound on my head caused by that battle? I was only 14 years old at the time, and I couldn't even hold an axe properly. My father took 4 brothers of our family to the battlefield to plunder silver coins. After the battle, I was the only one who survived. While cleaning the battlefield and looting silver coins, a dying frostman on the ground grabbed my head with his claws. His claws were cold and hard. I felt like my head was going to be scratched to pieces. It was all thanks to you, Brother Gwynk, who suddenly appeared and hit him with an axe from behind. The servants always say that the scar on my face was left by fighting with a giant bear. That's because the servants are in awe of me. But only I know in my heart among the 4 great vassals of my valley, isn't it you, old Gwynk, who is my closest relative? I uploaded the 8th century world map and some materials related to the background of this book to the app's reader circle. Those interested can take a look. It includes the general situation of the world in the 8th century, the 2 Silk Roads, the sea and the land, and the real general map of the world. I've noticed that many of you are interested in real history. When I get home in a few days, I'll take some time to organize the real background story and upload it to the work-related section. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 The Storm is Coming. Old Gunk chuckled dryly, stuffing his mouth with eggs and roast chicken. It was precisely because of this relationship that Duke Bernard had turned a blind eye to his repeated, snow-covered attacks on Coldwater Village over the past decade. After all, the two shared a life-or-death bond. I sent a raven for you to lead the troops, but I didn't expect you to show up at Storm's End within 10 days. Of all my men, you are truly the most loyal to me, Brother Gunk. Duke Bernard, ever attentive, knew Gunk's exuberant excitement wasn't driven by any so-called loyalty, but rather by his decades-long desire to gain control of Coldwater Village. Nestled in the mountains, Foggy Ducktown lacked access to the sea. For Old Gunk, only by gaining access could he build his own ship and achieve even greater success. Deep down, this man still harbored the desire to replace him. Sir, today I have the audacity to call you brother. Your orders are my god. Not only did we immediately mobilize our troops to leave the city, but we also hid during the day and moved at night, killing all the hunters who saw us along the way. We didn't let anyone know our whereabouts. Yes, Bernard picked up the teapot and poured a cup of hot milk tea for Old Gunk. It's really hard for you to travel at night in winter. Then there was a long period of silence. The two of them ate in silence, exchanging some meaningless polite words. Although they were all native Vikings, the combined age of the two people present was probably over 100 years old. In the eyes of the Vikings in the Middle Ages, they were already considered old men. No matter how much you eat, you can't eat much. After breakfast, the servants cleared the plates. Bernard waved his hand to dismiss the maid behind him, and Old Gunk also sent his son away. There was only a pot of black tea left on the table, and the two began to discuss the serious work of this trip face to face. Did you find anything on the way? After hearing this, Old Gunk took out a cloth bag from his back and poured out the contents of the bag with a loud noise. It was exactly the domestic garbage collected in Snowgrave Valley that night. Please look, brother, ever since Loki came to power, Hanshu Village has been dumping its domestic garbage in Snowgrave Valley every day. And when you rush from Fogducktown to Wind's End, Snowgrave Valley is the only way. That night, I asked my son to check out the garbage they dumped out, and found a lot of uneaten animal bones. Digging deep into the ground, there were still a lot of them. Bernard frowned at this. As a duke, he knew the kind of life his vassals led. It was already remarkable that Hanshu Village, where people used to starve to death every winter, could now eat meat every meal. But they were so extravagant as to throw away bones. This was something Bernard had never expected. Scandinavia had been a bitterly cold land since ancient times. The 7-month-long winter was even more unbearable. To survive the winter, no village dared to waste precious food. Animal bones were not inedible. After the barbecue was finished, the remaining animal bones were collected and thrown into a soup pot. After stewing for more than 10 hours, they became as soft as bread. Although they were difficult to digest, they were extremely filling, and one meal could satisfy hunger for 2 days. Every Viking born into poverty, even Bernard and Gunk, had eaten animal bones from the soup pot when they were young. Almost no village would waste animal bones. There was only one possibility for throwing away animal bones: the village had too much food to eat. The two of them had just returned from there a month ago, so they knew the situation perfectly well. Hundreds of Viking warriors were stationed in the village awaiting Loki's return. They feasted on food for 10 days, devouring most of their food supplies. When they left, Old Gunk had personally visited the barn and found only a dozen or so bags of sprouting sweet potatoes and potatoes. However, judging by the garbage he'd found, the villagers of Coldwater Village had been living on a diet of bones in just 1 month. Something was seriously wrong. Considering Blood Pigeon Town's recent large-scale purchases at Storm's End, Duke Bernard had begun to piece together the whole situation. Even Old Gunk narrowed his eyes after explaining Blood Pigeon Town's recent large-scale purchases. So, our other old friend, Hummel Blood Pigeon, is planning to side with Coldwater Village, Duke Bernard wasn't sure how to respond to this question. Blood Pigeon Town, with its 600 Viking shield axemen, was his most powerful vessel. He could lose Coldwater Village, but not Blood Pigeon Town. If Blood Dove and Storm's End went to war, it would be like two tigers fighting on the same mountain. Regardless of who emerged victorious, the ultimate beneficiary would most likely be Angus Mocklash, the lord of the neighboring Dragon's Breath Plateau. This cunning old man would surely seize the opportunity to raise an army and annex Bernard's territory. It was winter, and the mountains were covered in snow. Even if the Viking king on the other side of the peninsula learned of the war between the two dukes, he wouldn't be able to send troops. By spring, the war would be over. He couldn't allow that to happen. On the other hand, he couldn't allow the Blood Dove and Coldwater alliance to expand indefinitely. He still didn't know how the 20-year-old spearhead had managed to win over the old fox Hummel. But he knew that if he could win over the miserly Hummel, he could probably secure any ally he wanted within his own territory. This winter, he would nip the spark in the bud. "How many men did you bring this time?" Duke Bernard asked grimly, his brow furrowed. "Every soldier from Fogduck Town, 200 mountain warriors in all," Old Gunk replied. His village was small, second only to Frostwater Village. The town after Fogduck Town was a gimmick he'd added to his name for show. 200 men. Seeing Bernard lost in thought, Old Gunk knew what he was thinking. His old friend was a man of great foresight. Every step of his plan was designed to minimize uncertainty. But was he being a little too cautious this time? "I know what you're thinking," Gunk replied with a smile. "In the past, I attacked Frostwater Village without your knowledge, but it took a long time to take it because I was aiming for plunder. I don't want to burn down Frostwater Castle or destroy too many buildings. After all, what Fogduck Town needs is an outlet to the sea. If we leave it in ruins, I won't be able to use the village even if I were given it. Every spring, I send spies into Hanshu Village to observe. Their village has no more than 170 people at most. And only 40 of them are capable of taking up arms and fighting 200 versus 40. I don't think there's any chance I can lose this battle." Bernard nodded silently. On paper, this number was indeed sufficient. But that was only for Hanshu Village. Considering the neighboring Blood Pigeon Town, the 200 mountain warriors wouldn't be able to hold them back. "I'll give you another 300 Storm's End shield axemen. Plus 200 war horses." Old Gunk gasped at the words, but Bernard remained stern, his brows furrowed. "So, you'll have a total of 500 men under your command. This force will not only crush Hanshu Village, but also intimidate the neighboring Blood Pigeon Town. Blood Pigeon Town has 600 soldiers. 600 men taking out 200 is still a good fight, but 600 people want to kill 500 people. Although we don't know yet how much effort Loki has put in to get Hummel's help, I know that this stingy old man will definitely not spend all his money to help an outsider. Tomorrow I will take you to recruit soldiers. It's just that you have traveled all the way here. Rest for 3 days and then set off together after the recruitment is completed." Bernard actually made such a big move to deal with Hanshu Village, which was something Old Gunk had never expected. But having this number of troops in hand would be of great benefit to him. Having such a large number of troops in hand fully demonstrated the trust of this old friend in himself. 10th. "Within 10 days, I will get Loki's head and present it to my brother." When Old Gunk solemnly vowed to make a military order to Duke Bernard, in the kitchen at their feet, a kitchen worker was standing on the table, sticking an iron pipe to the stone ceiling and listening attentively. Everyone in the kitchen held their breath in order to create the best eavesdropping effect for him. "How is it? Did you hear anything? If I guessed correctly, this position should be right under the Earl's dining table." SHH, the eavesdropper immediately made a silent gesture, then lightly tapped the red wine used for seasoning with his finger and drew the numbers 503 on the wall. "Thank you all for your recommendation tickets, monthly tickets and rewards. You have won me the opportunity to be recommended next week. I, a newcomer, have been recommended for 2 consecutive weeks. I am very grateful for your recommendations, reading and collections. Thank you. I will try my best to write the best." Chapter 50 Jerome's first swordsmanship practice. Hanshu Village was still peaceful and tranquil. Hunting was unnecessary in winter, so all the hunters ate their fill. During the day, they practiced their martial arts and studied how to create humans. After a long night of hard work, at dawn, almost everyone was still sound asleep. But Loki was already awake. This was the day his companions were out. "We were all supposed to have made a fortune. But with Bernard's tantrum, it's a shame to lose the gold bars you found in the church," Loki said regretfully, standing before them. Boss, what are you talking about? The leading satyr frowned. Without your quick thinking, we'd all be dead. At least we each get a few dozen silver coins, enough to buy a few potions from Valhalla. This is a blessing our ancestors couldn't even dream of, right? It's because our leader is Loki reincarnated. Winter isn't the ideal time to travel. But the thirst for power drove these 10 young men to brave the blizzard to reach Valhalla. Loki didn't refuse these diehards who, willing to follow him on his adventure, had their heads pinned to their waistbands. In Viking culture, becoming a powerful chosen one was a lifelong pursuit for many. After ensuring they had enough dried meat and survival supplies, Loki gave each of them a horse and urged them to be careful on the road. The village gate slowly opened, and the 10 companions galloped away, disappearing into the vast snow at the village entrance as the first rays of sunlight appeared from the mountain tops. With these 10 men gone, Hanshu village was left with even fewer men capable of taking up arms. But Loki didn't mind. After all, it was winter on the peninsula, with daytime temperatures steadily hovering at -30 degrees Celsius and nights dipping as low as -50 degrees Celsius. In such temperatures, only those with no food left at home would dare to plunder other villages. Ever since Loki had all the houses in Hanshu village transformed into semi-underground catacombs, no one had troubled Hanshu village in winter. After seeing off his 10 companions, Loki donned his bearskin coat and headed straight for the kitchen area on the ground floor. The maids there were engaged in a very dangerous task, drying black powder salvaged from the seabed. All the other cargo from the ship had been given to Bernard, but Loki had rolled the black powder in a canvas and thrown it into the sea. After soaking for a full month, the black powder had become completely soaked. To reuse it, it had to be dried, a dangerous process. Loki used a low-temperature drying method, using the same method used by the people of northeast China in their previous life, using the Kang, hot bed, to heat the stone slabs to around 40 degrees Celsius. The damp powder was then spread thinly on top, drying into dry powder in about half an hour. 3 vats of gunpowder had been drying for over 20 days, and the 3 maids were almost done. After monitoring the drying process, the next stop was to find Jerome. Jerome's catahome was particularly conspicuous, for he had Sanji carve a wooden cross and mount it on the roof. Knocking gently on the door, Loki stooped and entered. Inside the warm room, a fire still burned in the fireplace. The first piece of furniture he saw was Jerome's desk, where he was working. Storm's End only had black ink, so the textbooks he'd recently hand-painted for the children of Frostwater Village were all done in monochrome. Even so, every book had the necessary illustrations. It was clear he'd worked late again yesterday. Approaching the large bed in the inner room, Loki saw a slender, white figure coiled around Jerome like an octopus. Father Jerome, however, was impeccably dressed. He clutched a holy cross in his hands, his entire body stretched out in the corner of the bed, like a corpse. This guy can't be a queer person, Loki thought. Probably not. The woman Loki had assigned him was the most beautiful of the Slavic women in this batch. Her name was Katya. She was 18 years old, 175 centimeters tall. She was about 9 heads tall, with ample breasts, a slim waist, and long legs. She had never had children. A Slavic woman with this build would have had no trouble applying for a job like a car model before he traveled through time. She was also rather aloof, unwilling to live with the village's hairy, rough Vikings. When Loki brought the scholarly Jerome over, she shyly agreed. He hadn't expected this guy to be so demanding. Loki needed his men and women to mate, as Hanshu village's biggest problem was its lack of population. Jerome opened his eyes at the sound. Suddenly, there was someone else in the room, and he scrambled out of bed. The girl on the bed muttered in her sleep as she continued to pull the bearskin over her body. Loki, however, smiled and glanced at his crotch, softly saying, "My dear brother, aren't you tired of holding it in all day? Your other brothers are comfortable every day, and you." When I became a bishop, I recited a vow to the Holy Lord Christ, shunning the world's carnal temptations and adhering to the principles of a monk, and, my lord, don't you also sleep in an empty bed every day? How should I put it? I'm still a little unaccustomed to these golden-haired women. Jerome hurriedly put on the bearskin to keep warm, picked up a nearby broadsword, and left Catan with Loki. Today was his first sword practice since arriving in Coldwater Village. It was also the first time in his life. The two walked through the village, one in front of the other. To Jerome's surprise, Loki led him to the kitchen area on the first floor of Coldwater Castle. In the kitchen, servants were busy stoking the stove, preparing breakfast for the entire village. Jerome followed Loki into a hall adjacent to the kitchen. He recognized it. It was the slaughterhouse in Frostwater Castle. "Aren't we supposed to practice swordplay today?" Loki nodded. "Here." Loki gestured to a nearby room, its walls thick with blood, and ushered Jerome in. As he entered the room, its floor and walls stained with blood, the door behind him slammed shut. Moments later, 2 wooden cages descended from midair. In the middle of the cages were 2 rather large roosters. "Brother Jerome, we Viking children usually begin our martial arts training by killing chickens. These 2 chickens are different from the chickens you find in England. Scandinavia is a bitterly cold land. All creatures that inhabit it have evolved a violent and aggressive nature. Even the pheasants at the bottom of the food chain are no exception." The 2 large roosters in the cages leaped and crowed furiously. Jerome had already noticed. "Be careful of their mouths. I've seen hunters killed by pheasants in the wild more than once. Good luck." The entrance slammed shut. The prison-like room was sealed shut. The door of the wooden cage rose, and 2 large roosters roared out, baring their eagle-like claws and lunging at Jerome's face. "No, I'm a monk of the Holy Bishop. I can't kill with malice." Unfortunately, the flying pheasants didn't understand English. They knew human weaknesses very well, and their first target was Jerome's eyes. In his panic, he completely forgot to recite his prayers and swung his broadsword haphazardly. However, the 2 pheasants fluttered their wings and leaped and ran, moving at an incredible speed. Quack, quack, the sound of an angry rooster crowing echoed from inside the house. "Village head, that priest won't die in the ground?" a sturdy Slavic servant asked worriedly outside the room. He was a good man. If he died under the claws of a chicken, he wouldn't even be able to enter Valhalla. What a pity. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.